Good evening. Welcome to the June 1st, 2011 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order at this time. The first item on tonight's agenda pertains to three public hearings. All three of these public hearings pertain to rezoning of properties at the request of the property owner or another applicant representing the property owner. We will open each public hearing. We will have a presentation by the staff. If the developer or the applicant would like to make some comments prior to the public hearing, we will also entertain those. Then we'll conduct the public hearing. During the public hearing, we'll open it, ask anybody to come forward to the podium to speak either for or against the proposal. Please hold your comments to no more than 3 minutes, since we have quite a few people here tonight that probably would like to speak. So make your comments as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes. Make all your questions to the Planning Commission and comments to the Planning Commission itself. If you do have questions, the staff will make note of your comments or questions, and we'll try to appropriately answer those at the end of the public hearing. Tonight we will be dividing one parcel into two different public hearings, that being a public hearing for zoning for commercial property and then another one for multifamily property. So those two will stand alone as far as the public hearings go. However, we probably will hear the comments that you make for both public hearings and then vote after the end of both those public hearings. We would ask you to realize that the purpose of this public hearing tonight is to make a recommendation to the City Council pertaining to these three public hearings that we'll be conducting here. The recommendation to the City Council will go in the form of a positive recommendation or a negative recommendation to them. If we do pass it on with a positive recommendation, the City Council will hold another public hearing at the City Council level at a date to be determined, where you would have another opportunity to come forward and give your opinion once again, either for or against the proposal. All that being said, I'll move on to the first public hearing, which is a zoning application for the property along Memorial Boulevard at Kings Ridge Drive, approximately 6.5 acres from office general residential to commercial highway, and approximately 1.5 acres from RS-15 to commercial highway. Carolyn Haynes, Terry Haynes, Lisa Haynes, and Haynes Brothers Lumber Company are the applicants. Ms. Ely, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman Lamb and Planning Commission members. As you mentioned, this first public hearing is for one request, but we've divided it into two separate public hearings so folks can have an opportunity to speak on the CH request and an opportunity to speak on the multifamily request. The subject properties are located along the western side of Memorial Boulevard, just south of Kings Ridge Drive. You can see that there are two small portions of property that are located on the northern side of Kings Ridge Drive. It consists of 4 parcels, all owned by a group of applicants associated with the Haynes Brother Lumber Company family. The application is to rezone approximately 6.5 acres from OGR, General Office District Residential, to CH, Highway Commercial District, and approximately 1.5 acres from RS-15, Single Family Residential District, to CH. The request is also to rezone 10.7 acres from that OGR district to RM16, which stands for Multifamily Residential District, and approximately 11.9 acres from RS15 to Multifamily District. This would result in approximately 8 acres located along Memorial Boulevard and shaded in the orange, being Zone CH, Commercial Highway District, and then approximately 22.6 acres zoned RM16, and that would be the properties that are shaded blue on the map before you. I've also included a map of a larger area in your agenda packets, and you can see that on the screen at this time. It shows you a broader view of the area. Since this applicant's request is to rezone the property to 2 different zone districts, CH and RM16, the Planning Commission will hold 2 separate public hearings on this matter. However, you'll discuss it after the conclusion of the second public hearing. The first public hearing is to consider rezoning these 8 acres, the orange area, which is now on the screen before you, to CH, Highway Commercial District. The properties immediately to the west of the subject property are zoned RS-15 and are a part of the developed Regency Park subdivision, which is in the city. The property to the south, not fronting on Memorial Boulevard, is zoned RS-15 and developed by the Regency Estate subdivision. The properties to the south, fronting on Memorial Boulevard, are zoned CL, which is our local commercial district, and CH, Highway Commercial District, and is developed with a restaurant, which we know as Sir Pizza, and an assisted living facility. The property to the east, directly across Memorial Boulevard, is zoned RS-15, Single Family Residential District. A portion of this property directly across from Kings Ridge Drive is developed as the Brent Mead subdivision. The greater portion of the property to the east is a large estate tract that includes a large house and surrounding grounds and is undeveloped in terms of the potential under the RS-15 zoning district. The property southeast across Memorial Boulevard is zoned Single Family Residential District RS-15 and is developed with a lawfully established non-conforming mobile home park. Also to the southeast is a small commercial center, zone CH, and a former motel site, zone CL, local commercial district. The property to the north across Kings Ridge Drive is zone CH with several of the lots fronting Memorial Boulevard, developed with commercial retail uses, with the remainder of the property undeveloped. The existing zoning on subject properties consists of approximately 17.2 acres zoned OGR and approximately 13.4 acres zoned RS-15. The portion of the property zoned OGR was annexed in the city in 1986 with an interim zoning classification of RS-15. That's because at that time there was no request to change the zoning, and any property that's annexed in the city with a residential zone gets an interim or default classification of RS-15. The OGR zoning for the property was established in 1989 after an application was made by Mr. Grady Haynes, who was also involved in developing the Regency Park and Regency Estate subdivisions. The zoning for this area has remained the same, although the name for the OGR district had changed to OGR. That's why it's OGR to this day. There have been some applications to rezone some or all of this portion of the tract over the past several years, but those applications have either been deferred or withdrawn before there's been a recommendation to the City Council. There have also been some applications contemplated but never submitted or included on the Planning Commission's agenda. The portion of the property zoned RS-15 was annexed in 1984 with an interim zoning classification of RS-15. It's remained this classification since. There was previously a house on the property that has been removed and relocated. The RM16 zoning classification is requested for the area shaded blue, and that will be the subject of the next public hearing. But as far as this public hearing, the applicants are requesting that 8 acres, shaded in orange on the map on the screen before you, be rezoned to CH, Highway Commercial District. Our CH district is a commercial zone that allows a broad range of commercial uses. The uses permitted are typical of those developed along Memorial Boulevard to the south and north. Residential uses are not permitted in the CH district. The maximum height allowed in the CH district is 75 feet. I've included a chart in addition to the maps that you have in your agenda packets that show the uses permitted chart for some various zones, and also includes the bulk regulations chart, which gives you lot requirements and setbacks and information like that. So at this time, the Planning Commission will conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning the CH portion of the property. We're not going to conduct a public hearing to consider the multifamily. That will be the subject of the next public hearing. But before you do open up the public hearing to consider rezoning approximately 8 acres located along Memorial Boulevard to CH, I believe a representative of the applicant would like to speak at this time. Well, no, the applicant's representative, I think, is the Murphys. Oh, here he is. Okay. And then after that, if you have any questions, staff will be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Seeley.
Thank you very much. Chairman Lamb and members of the Planning Commission, I am Matt Murphy, an attorney with Murphy & Murphy Attorneys, and I am here today for the Haynes family who are requesting a rezoning of approximately 24.49 acres located on the west side of Memorial Boulevard in Murfreesboro. The first rezoning request is to rezone property zoned RS-15 and OGR to commercial highway. The second request is to rezone property zoned RS-15 and OGR to RM-16 as indicated on the zoning map. This property belongs to the Haynes family and is located on Memorial Boulevard, a major highway in our city. The property to the north and south of the property in question, as shown on the exhibit to the zoning request, is zoned commercial highway. Due to changes in the marketplace, the close proximity of the property to existing commercial property, and the location of the property on a major thoroughfare in our city, it is very unlikely that this property will ever be developed high-end RS-15 or IFIS General. I would like to point out to the Commission as well the development of this property as it is currently zoned would probably not be good planning. The Haynes family, since last fall, has made an effort to work with the neighbors in the area related to this rezoning request. A meeting took place with the neighbors on October 10th, 2010, and there was the discussion about the possibility the Haynes would be willing to place deed restrictions on their property. And those were requested. The proposed restrictive bullet points were prepared and submitted to representatives of the neighborhood group in November 2010. These were the restrictive covenants they'd ask us to consider making. By early January 2011, no response had been received from the neighbors. Another meeting was held between the planning staff and the neighbors in late February 2011 on this matter. Finally, in a letter dated April 4th, 2011, the North Murfreesboro Alliance responded with proposed declarations of covenants and conditions on both these requested rezonings. These were submitted to Mr. Joseph Adelot, your planning director. The counter proposal was forwarded by Mr. Adelot to the Haynes family. As a result, the Haynes family and our law firm met several times in an effort to respond promptly to what the neighbors had requested regarding their proposal. At these meetings, every effort was made to incorporate many of the things the neighbors had requested as soon as possible. The bullet points for restrictive covenants for both the commercial and multifamily zoning were submitted by the Haynes, and it was an amendment to the initial bullet points that had been submitted. These incorporated many of the design elements in the neighbor's proposal. In fact, we met with the neighborhood group 8 days after we received their proposal on April 12, 2011 at 7 p.m., at which time our response was delivered to the representatives. At that meeting, each proposed restriction was explained in detail, a copy of which was delivered to the neighborhood group and has been distributed to each of you. I am told the neighborhood group met May 16, 2011, and it was decided not to respond to our counteroffer and to oppose both our rezoning requests. I hope this is not the case. I might tell you the Haynes have agreed prior to the third reading on both their rezoning requests before the City Council to record these restrictive covenants, even though the neighbors are apparently opposing their rezoning request. It is the Haynes' opinion that the proposed covenants offer many advantages to the neighbor and to our cities when the property is developed. Obviously, if the rezoning remains as it is, none of the proposed covenants would apply to the property, and it could be developed under the existing zoning. In any event, we are here today to request that the commercial zoning be approved, and later we'll request that the multifamily be approved. At this time, I am asking Brick Murphy to hit the highlights of the proposed restrictive covenants for the commercial property.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Brick Murphy of the law firm of Murphy & Murphy, and I'm going to walk through some of the high points of the proposed restrictive covenants. These covenants will control the development of the Haynes property and will benefit the neighboring single-family neighborhood. As you know, the closest residential subdivision to the Haynes property is Regency Park. The purpose of this portion of the presentation is to outline the Haynes' commitments to these neighbors, but we want to be clear that these are private commitments that are being made, and the city won't enforce these, which is the nature of a restrictive covenant. These restrictions, as Matt mentioned, would be recorded before the third and final reading of the application before the City Council. And these restrictions would affect the future use and development of the Haynes property moving forward. They'd be recorded at the Register of Deeds and would run with the land, so they would bind subsequent purchasers. I'm going to talk about the commercially zoned areas. I'm going to skip over the slides for the multifamily, and we'll come back to those in the next presentation. In the commercially zoned area, they'd be subject to the Gateway Design Overlay District standards, which apply which would be similar to the standards in the avenues. For example, the Avenue Shopping Center on Medical Center Parkway is subject to the Gateway Overlay Design standards, which we would be willing to adopt in the commercial area. The landscaping as well would be per Gateway Overlay District standards. In the event that there's development, the entire track will make an attempt to preserve the trees along the perimeter of both the commercial and the multifamily site. No single building in the commercial portion will exceed 60,000 square feet. This would prevent the development of a big box retailer. Your Walmarts, your Targets would be prohibited from going on the site. This limitation would not apply to a single commercial strip center with multiple units, an example of which would be the Whole Rob Strip Center down Memorial Boulevard that has the Papa Murphy's Pizza in it. That's a strip center with multiple units. This limitation also would not apply to office buildings. The limitation is for retail. I'm going to skip this slide. The building materials would be primarily in the commercial area brick, stone, real or faux, marble or scored precast concrete. However, smooth wood, fibrous cement siding, your hardy plank, stucco, synthetic stucco, or ephes would be allowable, but only as a secondary material. So you'd have primary materials being stone or brick, marble, and secondary materials, your hardy plank, your ephes, your stucco. Vinyl would only be allowed for soffits, trims, and windows. The goal here is these aren't going to be vinyl buildings. Soffit, trims, and windows would be the only place that vinyl would be allowed. Prohibited building materials. Exposed smooth service panels would be prohibited. That's your corrugated metal. It would be a prohibited building material, period. Additionally, during these deliberations with the neighborhood focus group, the Hayneses, the applicants, and my firm negotiated both extensive restrictions as to color, height of buildings, landscaping, buffering, and screening, as well as extensive restrictions as to exterior lighting. The goal behind these negotiations and restrictions is to soften the effects of this development and its long-term impact on the neighbors. And we feel like these restrictions would do that. We also feel strongly that the property in question can be developed in a way that's compatible with the very nice single-family residential subdivision, Regency Park. We feel that a commercial zone for this portion of the property would be in keeping with the long-term trends of development along Memorial. You've got commercial all down that strip. In closing, we ask the Planning Commission to vote in favor of the application. I'll be here to answer any questions, as well as my partner, Matt Murphy, and Terry and Larry Haynes. The applicants are also present. They're the owners. And I will speak again on the multifamily here in a minute, but we'd ask you to vote in favor of the commercial. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else representing the applicant would like to speak then? Nobody? Mr. Adlott, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, sir.
At this time? Okay.
I'll be listening to see what people...
Before I open the public hearing, let me remind everybody that this is pertaining to the approximately 8 acres along Memorial Boulevard that is requested to be rezoned to commercial highway. And that's what we need to make our comments toward, is this area right here being rezoned to commercial highway. So at this time, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward to the microphone that'd like to speak. When you come forward, please give your name and state your address, speak into the microphone so we can hear you.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb and Planning Commission members. I'd like to ask the question before I proceed. If I understand it, you're going to have 2 separate hearings.
Could you state your name, sir, and address?
Okay. My name is Billy Pearson. I live at 3026 Wessex Drive. My property joins the Haynes on the southern boundary at the end of Wessex, a dead-end street. Now, may I ask the question, sir?
Yes, sir.
I understood you're going to break this down into 2 hearings. Will I be allowed to speak in both hearings?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will now speak on the commercial. I believe that's...
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
I am opposed to the zoning because we have a very nice neighborhood in Regency Park, and we want to protect it. That's North Murfreesboro Alliance and North Murfreesboro. I believe there are enough commercial property along Murfreesboro and along Memorial Boulevard. We don't need any more strip malls. We don't need any more commercial highway spot zoning. Murfreesboro is full of it. It reminds me of Illinois Avenue when I was a young lad in Detroit, and they had nothing but automobiles, new and used, for miles and miles and miles. I'm opposed to it. I believe it is properly zoned to the integrity of the neighborhood. Now, last Friday, I counted 32 parcels starting at the Regions Bank right beside the Office Depot on both sides of the street, down to the public, 32 commercial buildings that were vacant for lease or for rent. Now, going a half a block off, there are 3 buildings there off Northfield, large buildings. We have grocery stores vacant, we have restaurants vacant, we have commercial buildings vacant, and restaurants vacant. One had moved in, he lasted 6 months. Mr. Adlott had a meeting in the 2010, you said like October, and he stated at this meeting that there would be no exits going down Wessex or Majesty into Regency Drive. Now, he said that in 2010, and in February 2011, these questions were posed to him by the homeowners. Traffic congestion means of egress. State and city engineers decide and work with my staff in city planning Adelaide. What about the 2 roads, question from homeowners, lead into this property from Regency Park for Majesty and Wessex? Would these roads become entrances and exits from apartments? No. These roads should be gated and used for only emergencies like tornadoes. This was also made in October 2010. In the Hamptons, question from homeowners, We were told that a road would stay gated, but the fire department took off the lock. I believe this was a case of gate placed on a road that was extended in the case. I think the developer or real estate told this to the homeowners. Who determines the entrances and exit locations with any development? Development should not have open roads into existing subdivisions. Before the Planning Commission, notes Mr. Adelot stated 5/18/2011. These are his comments. He said the subject project is well served by access to public streets from Memorial Boulevard, a state highway, borders the property along its entire east side. Any future access to Memorial Boulevard will require approval of both the City Transportation Department and TDOT. Kings Ridge borders the entire north side of the property. Kings Ridge Drive is a city street that was constructed by the city on a cooperative agreement with the applicants whereby they give the right-of-way for the street and agreed to pay the city for the cost of construction within a period of time upon the development of the property. This street provides connectivity for the greater Regency Park subdivision and Memorial Boulevard serves as a back to Siegel School. Majesty Drive dead ends into the street track near the southwest corner, and Wested Drive dead into the track along the southern border. Both of these streets simply dead end to the track, and upon development can be extended into the track, and depending upon the form of development that eventually takes place on the property. These two street connections may or may not be necessary for delivery of public services or for emergency response. I've been told by existing neighbors, I've only been there 3 years, that this property has many sinkholes. Time up.
Yes, sir. Just wind it up.
Thank you, and I encourage you to vote against this.
Thank you, sir. Who would like to be next?
Good evening. My name is Ed Morrison. I live at 738 Regal Drive. I would like to also oppose the rezoning. I too believe that we have plenty of commercial blight along that area, as well as other areas that it's vacancy after vacancy, and we don't feel that adding additional commercial property, commercial business along there would be in it wouldn't be supportive of the kind of neighborhood that we have out there. So I'd just like to go on record saying I oppose the rezoning. I think it should stay Office General, which would be much more conducive to the environment that we have out there, and whereas the commercial highway would open it up to who knows what. So I oppose it.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison.
Mr. Lamb, members of the Zoning Commission, my name is Larry Quinn. I live at 318 Westchester Court in Murfreesboro. I'm opposed to the rezoning of the Haynes property. The zoning should be left as is. Our homes are the largest purchase many of us will ever make in our lives. The homeowner, this is where we return to every day. This is our castle, our fortress against the outside world, where we've dreamed our dreams, set down our roots in the community, raised our families, lived our lives, shared our joys and our sorrows. We're now challenged by a request for the change of the zoning of the Haynes property on Memorial Boulevard from family office to commercial highway. This will devalue, erode, corrupt the value of the homeowner's property because of the proposed commercial interest to be built on the Haynes property that will join our property and the property of our neighbors. There are 7 retired couples that live on Westchester, many that live in the neighborhood. There are many more that live in the neighborhood. The proposed commercial interest to be built on the Haynes property will have a severe negative impact on our retired neighbors. They're the ones that live on a fixed income and do not have the years to return to the workforce to try to recoup their money lost by the devaluation of the property. If the zoning should go through, the zoning change will only benefit a few and have a large negative impact on hundreds of homeowners that live in the area. The greatest impact will be on our senior citizens that just want to live out their golden years in peace and tranquility. What is a peace of mind worth to them on the marketplace? The homeowners have spent their years on a job earning a salary to provide for their homes, necessities of their families, and a way of life. It is said that time is money. Time is also life. The citizens have spent their lives earning a salary to provide for their families. With every beat of their heart, every breath that they have taken, every thought process, every muscular skeletal movement to perform the task to complete the job for themselves or their employer, that they have earned a salary to provide for their families. To devalue someone's property is to devalue their lives and the way of their life. If this zoning should go through, you're devaluating the lives of the citizens of the community and negating the hard work they have performed on their jobs. On Election Day, we have an opportunity to cast our votes for the person or persons we wish to represent us in government. We can also vote, let our voices be known through the written and oral word. We can also vote with our wallets to support the businesses that support us with the best service and product for the money spent. We do not have to support the businesses forced upon us in North Murfreesboro area that do not fit the character, the harmony, or our neighborhood. We have many voices, but we speak as one. This is our homes. It's personal to us. It is not a business. This is our homes. It's personal to us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman Lamb and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Christy Newell, and I live at 3118 Damsel Court. My house backs up to the Haynes property. I'm on the corner of Kings Ridge and Damsel Court. My husband and I bought our house in 1994. It was brand new. We liked the neighborhood. The homes were upscale but not over the top. Deeds for the plots in Regency Park sold by the Haynes brothers were restrictive. The homes had to be of a certain size. They had to be predominantly brick-faced. We weren't allowed to have washing lines and this kind of thing. Our house was called the house with all the windows by the children in the neighborhood. In fact, 11 windows of my house look out from the back directly onto this property, which includes both the suggested high-density apartments and the commercial, one in front of the other. Seeing the field there, we were concerned about how it might be developed when we were looking to buy the house. So we were careful to research its zoning before we made a decision about purchasing. We learned it was Office General, OGR, which we understood to mean an office park of low-rise buildings with landscaping and parking areas. This meant that most of the activity in that area, once developed, would take place when we were at work. During evenings and weekends, when we were at home, the area would be quiet and there would be little to no traffic. That was reasonable. We would not have purchased our home if it had been zoned for apartments or commercial. Traffic, noise, and smelly dumpsters being emptied in the early hours of the morning would have made us look somewhere else. I understand that in the current economic climate, it may be very difficult to sell property for offices. However, that's not the fault of the homeowners in the neighborhood, who have all seen declines in net worth due to the recession. My own home is on the market due to my needing to downsize, but the large sign erected by the Hayneses on their lot that says development potential is making it difficult for me to sell my property because prospective buyers are afraid that this means the property has already been zoned commercial. The Haynes family sold lots for people like me to build upscale homes in Regency Park. They would not have been able to sell these lots for the price they did had the zoning for the adjacent land been RM16 and CH. They undoubtedly profited as a result of our expectations as buyers that the zoning of OGR was a bona fide assurance of how the land would be used in the future. When land is zoned by the city, it's a covenant between the city government and property owners, addressing the way the land is designed to be used in the future. The citizens of Murfreesboro need to be assured of good faith and transparency on the part of the Board of Zoning Appeals and the City Council. We want our city government to stand by their word, not just for this neighborhood, but for the entire community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newell. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Mike Spiro. I'm the property owner at 3043 Regency Park. I actually don't live there. My mother-in-law does. And we are in favor of it. Quite frankly, she's elderly, and it makes it easier for her to get around and get to any businesses down that way. So, excuse me. That's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spiro.
Mr. Lamb, members of the Commission. My name is Charlotte Quinn. I live at 318 Westchester Court and Regency Estates. 3/4 of our backyard adjoins the southwest corner of the Haynes property. I'm opposed to the current proposed rezoning of the Haynes property because we don't see a planned development in place, and therefore it renders it as speculative rezoning only to attract the attention of potential buyers. We are uncertain about these deed restrictions they intend to attach to this property. Joseph Adelot, the city planning director, invited the homeowners from established neighborhoods in North Murfreesboro to have input into the preliminary process of developing covenants, conditions, and restrictions for land development in our area. The homeowners met. We appointed a focus group to act as our liaisons between Mr. Adelot and the Haynes brothers and negotiate what type of development we felt would be appropriate for the property. It took us 6 months. There were hundreds of homeowners. We completed surveys, questionnaires, exchanged emails, phone calls. We produced a 22-page, very detailed, that included everything but the hoot of a barn owl in our presentation, and then presented it to Mr. Adelot on April 4th, 2011. It reflects our compiled thoughts, suggestions, and recommendations. We learned that the city would not govern this. We were advised without third-party enforcement, the homeowners would need to seek legal recourse to have these covenants, conditions, and restrictions properly enforced and maintained. This news made the homeowners question why the city approached us for our input if they never intended to enforce our document. In lieu of deed restrictions, we then requested the city develop an overlay district for the North Murfreesboro neighborhoods to protect us from big box realtors and commercial development. Homeowners are concerned about commercial developments and apartments and retailers located near our properties because of what it may bring into our community. We're also gravely concerned about the potential of blasting and blasting damages to our homes. Homeowners insurance does not cover damages caused by blasting. Joseph Adelot himself said it best when he said, North Murfreesboro is the heart of Murfreesboro and needs to be developed responsibly. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn. Anybody else?
Good evening. I'm Brad Smotherman. I own at 730 Regal Drive. I've owned there for about 2 years. I've really enjoyed the subdivision. I have the best neighbors that I could ask for. I hope it continues to be a great development, and I think that it will. That being said, I am in favor of the proposed zoning change. My personal opinion is that a commercial highway development is going to have a better aesthetic appeal on the Memorial Boulevard than any type of an office space. If you look on Memorial, you have larger commercial properties. I think that this is going to go along with that, especially since you have the gateway type of appeal with the building materials that you're going to have. Secondly, the amenities are called into question. I personally think that the amenities on the north side of town are lacking. Every time my wife and I want to go grab something to eat, we always head to the avenue side of town, and I hope that will change in the future. I think that the free market needs to decide what goes there, and as long as it's the commercial highway with the deed restrictions that have been called into place, I think that it's a good option for the homeowners, and I also think that it's a good option for the people in Walter Hill and the surrounding communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smotherman.
Chairman Lamb and Planning Commission. I'm Dr. Thomas Solkowski, local physician. I reside at 503 Kings Ridge Drive, right across the street from Mrs. Newell. So we're very close to the property in question. In opening, I'd like to state that those wanting commercial highway because of the aesthetics and the avenue appeal, because of the deeds that were brought up, aren't enforceable. Therefore, it may look good on paper, but they can do what they want. And I feel that that is what might happen if this is zoned commercial highway. I vehemently oppose this zoning request. If you look at the map that we were shown earlier, you can see originally that this property folded into the Regency Park subdivision. Why it wasn't developed as part of the subdivision with the higher end single family dwellings at that time, I'm not sure. One probably is that the Haynes brothers lived on a large tract of that property. Interestingly, they moved that house and no longer reside there and reside in another part of Murfreesboro. Therefore, they've decided to try to sell the property. We've been here on other occasions debating these issues, probably over the last 10 years. I've been a homeowner for 13 at that house. Every time these questions have been brought up and they've either withdrawn their request or they've been denied in some fashion, nothing has really changed since that time. The appropriate zoning is made right now for Office General, which fits in nicely. There are other Office General developments, one slightly up across from the Regal Drive area. It hasn't been developed yet, but nothing's really being developed yet, which is one of the other concerns. They want zoning change for commercial highway, but there is no planned development. There are no interested parties. Basically, I see this move to get this small outer track as commercial highway as a way of trying to make a large financial gain in a poor market for property that isn't selling. Additionally, the property probably won't gain the financial response that they want if it's developed as single-family homes or Office General. But the Planning Commission, in its wisdom in earlier years, decided to have this property fold into the residential community, and we should stand by those designs. We do have plenty of commercial property that's vacant. There are properties that are near other commercial areas that are more appropriate. We don't need that next to a large residential subdivision. If we bring commercial highway in, the traffic will escalate even more. This brings safety issues in for the children of the neighborhood. I've already seen a huge increase in traffic in the property to the north. I appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Anybody else?
Hi. My name is Greta Gerald. This is my daughter, Briley. We live at 3240 Memorial Boulevard, which is directly to the east of the property in question. My husband purchased that property in the 80s and later sold off what is now Brent Mead. We support the rezoning and encourage you to make that decision. We, like the gentleman earlier, always have to drive to the other side of town, and we would like to see some responsible development in our area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gerald. Anybody else?
Good evening, Chairman, Commission. My name's Tom Davis. I live at 502 Bluebell in Palmer Heights. I don't have a personal interest in this because it's farther north than where I live, but I do happen to know that as this goes, so goes the rest of the development on Memorial Boulevard, so it does affect me from a personal standpoint. But as a professional standpoint, I'm a professional civil engineer. I'm a retired Navy Civil Engineer Corps officer with a fairly extensive background in planning, including a stint in the Chief of Naval Operations Office of Military Construction Planning and Programming. I'm adamantly opposed to this type of speculative rezoning when we don't have a specific project to look at and review. I call this slash and burn development, and I think this type of development in this area of long-standing residential areas should be rejected out of hand, shouldn't even be considered. When they can come to us with something that says, look at this, this is what we want to do, then I think it should be considered. But this type of slash and burn development that's going to affect the whole nature of that Memorial Boulevard corridor, I strongly urge that you oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Anybody else?
My name is Beverly Sharp, and I live at 422 Kings Ridge Drive, Regency Park. I ask you to please not recommend this zoning request. This requested commercial highway and high-density multifamily zoning is not compatible with a single-family residential district such as Regency Park. The small number of commercial uses that are compatible with the residential area are already allowed under the current OGR. There is no need for a zoning change. If changed to commercial highway, most of the 136 permitted uses for CH are very inappropriate to a residential area, and these uses are use by right under the law. The large size of this property, if it is changed, could easily become another ugly commercial strip development, or worse, a fish hatchery, a record storage yard. Anyway, these uses by right, once it's changed, must be allowed under CH. We know that the family has made some promises about voluntary restrictions. Unfortunately, we don't know about the credibility of this, plus the restrictive covenants would require a private civil suit to enforce. This would mean hiring attorneys and expense and time, and litigation, as I'm sure you know, is very difficult. The city would not be backing this at all as far as these restrictions. In an open letter to the Commission in 1988, Mr. Haynes, when he was trying to get some change from residential to OGR, said, "We believe that this zone, Office General, would represent the best use of this expensive property. By obtaining the Office General rezoning, the people who purchase lots in the new section of Regency Park will know in advance how this land adjacent to them will be developed." Now, that is the problem here. We rely on this zoning. Our property values rely on this zoning, and our, not just that, but our way of life as a nice upscale residential area. Further, this is speculative rezoning. As others have mentioned, this is adverse to the orderly growth of the city. As you know, one very important purpose of zoning ordinances is to prohibit use, buildings, or structures incompatible with the character of established districts. And that is a quote from the law. In the past, the city has taken a firm position against unrestricted commercial strip development. In 1988, the Commission minutes state, "Staff expressed concerns about strip development through this area. and how we are attempting to control that, and feels that the Office General is the most restrictive and more suitable. The staff also said the approval of this request, talking about the OGR request, could lend itself to creating strip development from Haynes Drive to Thompson Lane. Development of this type is what is being discouraged in the city's future land use plan. It generally develops haphazardly. So we strongly oppose any kind of speculative rezoning, and we urge you strongly to not recommend this rezoning. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Sharp.
Chairman Lamb and the members of the Planning Commission, my name is Whitney Murphy, and I live at 311 Braxton Drive in the Brentmead subdivision. My husband and I moved into Brentmead just last year. I was pregnant at the time. I was very excited to move into such a nice neighborhood so that we could accommodate our growing family. We left a highly populated, densely packed area in the Nashville area, and we were very, very happy with what we saw here. We liked the mix of the retail and the homes, and we oppose the rezoning as it is stated here. We believe that there are many other, that there are many other strip centers that have vacant areas that can be used. The fact that they're not being rented out at this time causes me some concern as to why we think that this will be successful. I have some more comments about the apartment later on, but I encourage you to oppose it altogether. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Would anybody else like to speak?
My name is Douglas Sharp, and I reside at 422 Kings Ridge Drive in Regency Park subdivision. We respectfully ask that you recommend to deny this rezoning request. Many of the homeowners in the adjacent and surrounding areas have explicitly stated that they relied on the current OGR zoning of this property when making a decision on where to purchase a home. They believed, and we think rightly so, that the city had already determined the best use of this property and that the rezoning would remain stable. We think that the city has a moral and fiduciary responsibility to its citizens to preserve zoning on which people relied when making home purchase decisions. We believe that nothing of substance has changed since the granting of the zoning request for Office General. Certainly the surrounding areas have experienced growth and expansion of services. However, this occurred in areas already designated for such development. It is certainly true that nothing's changed for the homeowners. We still live exactly where we always have, adjacent to the property. The planning director has stated publicly that North Murfreesboro is the heart of Murfreesboro and should be developed responsibly. It is unfortunate that the planning director and his staff are now taking the position that the OGR zoning may no longer be appropriate to this property. At a recent meeting between staff and landowners, the staff stated, quote, "It has become clear to the planning staff that the existing RS-15 and OGR may no longer be the most appropriate zoning for the area, considering the monumental changes that have taken place in the community since these zoning classifications were established for the property in the 1980s. We challenge the director to prove that monumental changes have occurred and have occurred for all parties, not just one. It is not legitimately the city's concern whether or not the landowner can improve the value or saleability of a property through rezoning. The city should not act as a realtor for landowners. The proper concern of the director and his staff should be the orderly and planned development that enhances and builds the city for the common good and welfare. Recently, U.S. District Judge Thomas Wiseman ruled in a rezoning case that the landowner has, quote, a mere expectation and not a constitutional right to have their land rezoned or to get a conditional use permit, end quote. The landowner here does not have a right to rezoning merely to improve the value of the property, nor should the city support this idea. Planning Commission members, please respect and enforce the zoning ordinances that you put in place to protect the homeowners. Doing anything less diminishes your credibility We strongly urge you to recommend that this rezoning request be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp.
Chairman Lamb, Randy Caldwell, live at 315 Regal Drive. First time in 17 years I've been addressing this board as a citizen. I've lived at this address for 17 years. Consider myself fortunate and blessed to have lived in this community, have made a lot of friends, a lot of compatriots as a result of raising 3 children in that community, all of which went through the Siegel High School system, 2 of which are at MTSU right now. God willing, the one will graduate this summer, and another one getting ready to enter MTSU. I have a significant investment in the community and a lot of pride related to where I live. When I moved here 17 years ago, as many of you know, I'm a planner, landscape architect, like a civil engineer that's been doing this for nearly 28 years. I went into this with my eyes wide open, understanding I was buying a lot, 6 houses from a 5-lane arterial, with the full expectation of knowing how development goes, that corridor would develop commercially more than likely in the future, and actually welcome that. I'm one of those individuals that takes 5 trips to the hardware store or 5 trips to the grocery store just to accomplish one task for getting things. So waste a lot of gas going back and forth. I certainly appreciate and respect the opinions that have been communicated here relative to those that oppose that, and I hope they do the same for me, that I'm speaking in favor of this. I'm in favor for a couple of reasons. One, if you look at the zoning pattern, this is not spot zoning. There's CH on both sides of this piece of property. If you look at the west side of Memorial, from going from Thompson Lane to Regal Drive where I live, just about every piece of property along there is zoned commercially, with the exception of the RS-15, that little piece that is out there right now. So there's a zoning pattern that's been established and expected along this corridor. The reason I'm for this commercial is, one, because it doesn't back up directly to the neighbors that are behind this. This is limited in its depth with a land use transition that I know some won't feel the same as me, I feel is appropriate between the 2 developments that I think will protect the neighborhood. Second, the other reason I am is because of the restrictive covenants that are in place. As you know, I'm very familiar with the GDO requirements. I wrote most of that and understand it and have to implement it on a pretty consistent basis. And I'm actually very proud of what's accomplished out at the avenues and what the result of that is. I do feel that, I know the effectiveness of those if they are enforced on there. In addition to that, they've gone to additional criteria that basically sets additional architectural requirements of that. And if enforced, if and in place, I think will be a development that we can be proud of. On a more personal note, I've been fortunate enough over the years, having raised 3 children in the neighborhood, and I guess I get kind of, I don't want to say tired about hearing the bads about our business community and the devaluation that it brings on our property. I can tell you from personal knowledge, many people know me here. I've been involved with many boards associated with what my kids have been involved in at the Siegel High School and at younger levels and activities. If it's not for the business community, I can tell you from personal experience that they donate, they give back to the community. And I can tell you there's organizations that I've been involved in that cannot survive and keep the costs down associated with those activities that our children and others participate in. So again, I think it's an appropriate land use given the fact that it's a shallow depth. It's not up against those that are directly against it. And again, I certainly respect those that haven't. Again, I want to appreciate the work that Mr. Baum and Mr. Lane also put in, because I know, and others on the committee, because I know they worked hard with the property owners to develop a set of restrictive covenants and work through that process, even though the community decided to vote against going forward with those. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Anybody else that has not spoke that would like to speak? Last call. Seeing nobody come forward, I will close the public hearing on this matter. We're going to move on now to the next public hearing before we start any discussions. The next public hearing is pertaining to a zoning application for property along Memorial Boulevard at Kings Ridge Drive, approximately 11.9 acres from RS 15 to residential multifamily 16, and approximately 10.7 acres from OGR to RM 16. Once again, Carolyn Haynes, Terry Haynes, Lisa Haynes, and Haynes Brothers Lumber Company are the applicants. Ms. Ely.
Thank you again, Chairman Lamb and Planning Commission members. You mentioned, and it is in fact the second portion of the public hearing, and this section is for the properties which I described previously. I won't go back through that description because we're all very familiar with the property that's located along Kings Ridge Drive and Memorial Boulevard. The map that is in your packets and can be put on the screen at this time shows an area shaded blue, and that's the subject of this discussion, of this next public hearing. And the request is to rezone approximately 11.9 acres from single-family residential district, RS15, to RM16, and that's multifamily residential district, and to rezone approximately 10.7 acres from OGR, Office General District Residential, to that RM16 district, with the same applicants being those who requested it. Again, there are several maps that show the location of the property, and there's the bulk requirements and the chart with the bulk requirements in your staff comments, and also the uses that are permitted in this RM16 zoning classification. The RM16 zoning classification is a multifamily district that allows by right residential uses, including detached and attached single-family dwellings on lots of at least 6,000 square feet. It allows two-family dwellings on lots of at least 6,000 square feet. It allows three-family dwellings on lots of at least 9,000 square feet. It allows four-family dwellings on lots of at least 12,000 square feet. It also allows multiple family developments with a density of 16 dwelling units per acre if it's over an acre, and of course this is over an acre. It allows modest density bonuses for qualifying amenities such as swimming pools and tennis courts or other such recreational facilities as specified in our zoning ordinance. In the RM16 district, developments are allowed to have more than 4 dwelling units per structure. The maximum height in the RM16 district is 35 feet. The maximum height in the current zoning is also 35 feet, so that would be something that is not changing. So I believe that we're also going to have a short presentation from Matt Murphy regarding this portion of the request. So this public hearing will give folks an opportunity to speak for the rezoning to RM16. If they spoke in favor against this, for the CH zone, they now have a second opportunity to speak, and that would be for specifically the RM16 portion of this request. Mr. Murphy is going to give a short presentation, and then we'll conduct the second portion of the public hearing, after which staff will be available for questions, and Planning Commission should discuss the item and then formulate a recommendation for each request to send to City Council. Mr. Murphy.
Chairman Lamb and members of the Commission, I have given you all the sequence of events that led to the restrictive covenants that we've explained tonight, so I won't go back through that. I want the record to reflect, though, that those comments apply to this rezoning too. A couple of things. One thing that we noticed, the website of the neighborhood group opposing our rezoning had the following statement in a memo dated May 1st, 2011. The heading was Response to Homeowners' Questions, question number 1. And the first sentence states, we believe that RM16 zoning is a natural buffer between existing residential and commercial highway. The question then asked if the property was zoned RM16, and these were directed to Mr. Adelot, would it ever be rezoned to commercial highway? Mr. Adelot said the city would not view this favorably, and it is quite unlikely. So their own website thought that this was a good transition zone, and we certainly think it is too. I might point out the property on the north side of Thompson Lane at the corner of Haynes Drive begins with commercial, the Publix store and other commercial. Moving east, we find multifamily, the Paddock Club, and then residential. There have been some comments tonight about property values. We have checked the tax appraisals of the single-family residential that joins the Paddock Club and the commercial on Memorial. This is a similar development to what is proposed, and generally the values of those properties have increased since the commercial and multifamily was built. One other thing that I've heard sort of thrown around is crime statistics in apartment houses. This is going to be a very upscale apartment complex because of the restrictive covenants. We have checked the crime statistical map, and there were no crimes reported at the Paddock Club apartments in the last 6 months. And unfortunately, there are not many neighborhoods in Murfreesboro that can say that. I'm going to ask now that Brick Murphy explain the restrictive covenants that apply to the multifamily rezoning request, and we do request that this rezoning be approved as well.
Once again, I'm Brick Murphy of the law firm of Murphy & Murphy. Looks like our PowerPoint isn't coming up. That's no problem. I'll just walk y'all through it. Oh, there we go. Okay. As applicable to the multifamily and commercial areas, I'm going to discuss some of the restrictions that are applicable, particularly to the multifamily area. 3-story buildings must be a minimum of 80 feet from the property lines that are adjacent to any single-family residential. However, if an apartment building has no windows, decks, has no windows or decks facing single-family residential, they can be closer than 80 feet, but no closer than 50 feet. The goal here is we're not going to have balconies or windows looking down into people's yards. So we'll have additional setback requirements if there are balconies or windows facing single-family residential. 20 feet of landscaping will be required adjacent to any single-family property lines. And the apartment development would have its primary access off of Memorial Drive, so you'll have your primary ingress and egress off the major arterial Memorial. To go back through again, building materials, which will also be applicable to the multifamily. The goal here is we want this to be a high-scale development. So the primary building materials would be stone, brick, marble, or scored precast concrete. And then as a secondary material, we'd allow smooth wood, stucco, your fibrous siding, which is your hardy plank, ephes as a secondary material. Once again, vinyl will only be allowed in soffits, trims, and windows. The goal here is we don't want a big vinyl apartment complex. What we want is a high-scale product with brick, stone, and then hardy plank as a secondary material. Once again, corrugated metal would be absolutely prohibited on the multifamily portion of the project. And during the discussions of the focus group, the Haynes have agreed to, once again, extensive restrictions dealing with colors, building heights, landscaping, buffering, and lighting. Once again, the focus of these discussions was to reduce the impact of the development of this property on the neighbors. We would have a goal that the colors are compatible with the neighboring subdivisions and that it wouldn't be obtrusive. Once again, we believe that a well-thought-out, well-managed multifamily project would serve as a good transition from the proposed commercial to the residential subdivisions that adjoin the proposed multifamily. We're asking that the Planning Commission vote in favor of the application. We feel like we can develop a very nice multifamily development that will be compatible. So we'd ask you to vote in favor. I'll be here to answer any questions. My partner, Matt Murphy, will be here to answer any questions. And Larry and Terry Haynes, the owners of the property, are also here. So we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. There's no further comments, then we'll open this public hearing for the rezoning of this area to RM16. You come forward just like we did the last time to the microphone, state your name. Please keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you again. As I say, I am Billy Pearson, 3026 Wessex Drive. Thank you for having this public hearing. I'm also opposed to the rezoning of multiple housing, RS16. I believe it is properly zoned as OGR and RS15. You know, I had a choice when the real estate told me 3 years, do you want to go south? I said, no way do I want to go out the Christiana Way or out that way, 231. It's very, very congested. Do you want to go west? No way do I want to go to Casey Lane. That's the biggest mess out there I've ever been involved. I try to go the back roads, Salem Road, if I've got to go anywhere that way, and keep from going there, even Old Fort Parkway. So I chose to move north, which I'm very proud I did. I have great neighbors, people that I'd known for years, people that I went to church with but did not know they were across the street from me. We all live in harmony. We keep well-kept yards. I have to cut mine more often because my neighbors cut regularly. And I have fussed and concerned about that. I just don't want to cut them as much as they do. So it's very well manicured and very well prideful community. If you have multiple housing, Memorial Boulevard is constantly trafficked. I believe that I can vision 700 to 1,000 more people on Memorial Boulevard with cars. If you go multiple housing, and somebody must have developed it to student housing the way they've done South Rutherford, over off Tennessee Boulevard, the crossings and everything, and you rent for 4 students to 1 apartment, you can get your 700 to 1,000 people in there. Siegel schools are overloaded. I took my grandson for 2 years, living about a mile the way the crow flew, and about 2 miles by traffic. And the first day, I was 30 minutes getting there. He barely made the bell. So I had to start leaving 30 to 35 minutes to get there. Very congested down Thompson Lane. Very congested down Memorial. And even down Kings Ridge at various times during the school and various times down Regency Park. People are coming down there. You try to get out to the end of the street, and it's traffic congestion. It would be more people into all 3 schools of Siegel, which the middle school has trailers or outdoor, if you want to call them, and the others have over at the high school, outside, away from the building. Now, Mr. Murphy states that he quotes the Paddock Club, and we have discussed the Paddock Club because the Paddock Club is a very upscale apartment. I don't believe nobody will come in there and develop multiple housing as good as a Paddock Club. I understand the Paddock Club starts off at $1,400 apartment a month. Many people have moved there when their homes burned. Many people have moved there to get their children in Siegel School. Now, Thompson Lane is fully heavy traffic and growing more rapidly. We don't need any more. multiple housing out in that area. And I don't believe those people that would move in could afford like, a lot of them couldn't afford like the Paddock Club. I believe that the Paddock Club, people that live there for its temporary, have the excess and the monies to buy an upscale home like it complements Regency Park.
Mr. Pearson, we need to wrap it up, please.
Time up?
Yes, sir.
That's a fast 3 minutes.
Sorry.
But thank you. Encourage you to vote no.
I'm Mary Lassiter, and I live on Regal Drive. My concern is the growing number of apartments in our city. I call the Chamber of Commerce, City Planning, City Zoning. No one at these three offices could give me the total number of apartments in our city. I did find one document that stated that since 2005, we've built 5,482 apartment units in the city. Can you tell me how many apartment units are in the city of Murfreesboro today? How many have we built per year since the year 2000? And why do we need more apartments? Our area is already overcrowded. Siegel Middle and Siegel High School have multiple double portables. The school's enrollment numbers have gone hundreds beyond the building's capacity. The taxpayers of Rutherford County will have to pay for expansions or new buildings. Traffic is already a problem on Thompson Lane and Memorial when school is in session. Have you done a traffic survey when school's in session? The density caused by apartments will only increase this congestion. Finally, it's not the Planning Commission's job to rezone land to help a land developer sell his property. It's your job to protect the people in the neighborhoods and make sure that promises are kept, both at the city level and the developer's level. Speculative rezoning is frightening to me. I can only imagine the worst when the public is not told the intentions for the land. I would like to see the same forethought go into the north side of town that was given to the Gateway area. Thank you, and I am against this.
Thank you, Ms. Lassiter.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Ed Morrison, and I live at 738 Regal Drive in the Regency Park subdivision. We've lived there for approximately 24 years. We were attracted to this area initially because of the beautiful homes, the sizable lots, and the quiet peacefulness of this neighborhood and the surrounding neighborhoods. And over the years, this has changed considerably as things have built up around Memorial and Thompson Lane. We've heard a lot about the traffic and the crowding. But we still have a strong sense of family and a semblance of quietness and peacefulness in the neighborhood. And we don't want rezoning of nearby property to create or to continue to enable this eroding of this quietness and peacefulness that we enjoy in these neighborhoods. And this is why we stand in opposition to this zoning change. We feel that the current zoning is more in character with and retains the integrity of these neighborhoods. The best interests of the residents of the surrounding neighborhood should be of the utmost importance, and the Planning Commission should consider what is best for the residents more so than what is best for the landowners who are looking to change to a more favorable zoning in order for their property to be more sellable. I strongly encourage the Planning Commission to reject this zoning request and leave the zoning as it currently is, which we feel is in the best interest of the residents in the surrounding neighborhoods. It is noted that the Planning Commission zoned this property RS-15 and OGR to protect the homeowners in these neighborhoods. If this was the case when it was zoned previously, why would it not be the case now? Further, we'd encourage the Planning Commission to work with the residents of the North Murfreesboro area in order to develop an overlay that would restrict future development in the area to ensure the character and integrity of these neighborhoods are maintained going forward. And as I say, I oppose this as well.
Thank you, sir. Who's next?
Chairman Lamb and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Christy Newell. I live at 3118 Damsel Court and back up to this property. I spoke against it for the commercial highway. I also ask you not to change the zoning to the high-density residential. I want to point out to you, I don't know if anybody's really thought about this, but Siegel Elementary School does not have school buses. All of those children are brought by car, a few of them walk. So you have a huge, huge number of cars bringing in every single one of those children. And when I come home, if I come home at 2:30 in the afternoon, they're backed up all the way down Kings Ridge Drive, starting to go down the hill across from this property, sort of across from the field. They block my driveway. They're going all the way down Kings Ridge in the other direction. So, you know, the traffic is not just like it might be at a school that had school buses. There's some real problems there. You're going to need another traffic light. We already have a traffic light at Thompson Lane. We have one now at Osborne Lane. You'll need another traffic light in there. The congestion is going to become really significant. It's going to become one of those congested parts of town like we have, you know, south of the city. Of course, I'm also opposed to the ideas of dumpsters. You know, they empty them in the wee hours of the morning, rodents and the noise and light pollution, all of those things. But I would like to urge you to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newell. Anybody else?
I'm beginning to feel like popcorn. Hello again, Chairman Lamb, Commissioners. I'm opposed to apartments. Whatever you put on that property, and Terry and Lisa Haynes were my neighbors for almost 16 years, I'm going to be looking at permanently. It's going to be irreversible. If we have high-density apartments, gee, they're not living there. I am. I get the noise, the lights. I can't wait for the 4th of July and New Year's Eve. I can't wait to hear the dumpsters at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning when my husband, who goes to bed usually at 9:30 and has to get up at 4 and 5 in the morning because he travels. I can't wait for those 2 a.m. dumpsters to come in. And speaking of crime at Paddock Place, we have heard that there was a drug raid in February over there. I don't know if you can check on that, Mr. Murphy, but you may need to. Paddock Place backs up to single or to condos, not to single families. Those are actually connected townhouses over there. I have a friend that owns one. I have another friend who was in a situation like us, where the backyard meets the land that apartments were developed on. 5 years it took my friend before they could sell their house. They had high-end appliances, the granite, every bell and whistle you could think of in their house. They sold it for $40-something thousand less than they paid for it. We can't afford that hit. This 23 years ago, this was the biggest purchase of our lives. My husband's going to retire in the next year or two. We were counting on this property to help us in our retirement. We thank you for your consideration, and please understand that we are opposed to this, and this is not vendetta in any way against Terry and Lisa. Thank you.
Ms. Gwynn, would you state your name, please? You didn't state it the first time.
Oh, I thought I said Charlotte Quinn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
My name is Larry Quinn. I live at 318 Westchester Court. I oppose the change in the rezoning, oppose the increase in traffic, the noise congestion. As has been stated earlier, the dumpsters are from the trash collection services start in the early hours and continue all the way through the late morning. Sometimes they start at 10 o'clock at night. Sometimes I've been woken up by this. We don't need this type of noise increase into the neighborhood. We have enough as it is. We don't need the traffic. We already have enough as it is. We've already had an increase in crime. We've had a bank robbery. We've had illegal aliens trespassing in our neighborhood. About a month or so ago, I heard gunfire at 4 o'clock in the morning. The police came out a few minutes later. I don't know the results of it or what transpired, but we've already had an increase in crime. We can't predict the type of character of the people that are going to move into these homes, these multi-family dwellings. No one can predict the type of character of the people that will move in there. So I oppose any rezoning change to this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Who would like to be next?
I'm Brad Smotherman, 730 Regal Drive. I think that the buffer is reasonable given that the deed restrictions are in place the way that they are. Again, the building materials that are required with that, and the landscaping and the space as a buffer between the multifamily use and the RS-15 residential neighborhood of Regency Park. Secondly, just from a business perspective, my background is accounting and real estate and has been pretty much all my life. Just from a business perspective, whenever someone comes in and picks up a multi-million-dollar piece of land, they have to create an income stream in the future that is going to substantiate that type of cost. They can't do that by putting in lower-end apartments. It just doesn't make financial sense. Thirdly, the increase in traffic in apartments. I mean, as long as this city grows, you're going to have an increase in traffic, you're going to have an increase in apartments. If that's something that people are concerned about, I don't see that changing in the future. As long as we see the growth that we have, I still believe that our county is in the top 10 counties in the country as far as growth. I may be off on that, but I know at least recently we were. Lastly, I want to touch on price. The real estate market over the past few years, as we all know, has really been affected by the subprime meltdown and other issues. I don't think that this development is going to hurt price in our subdivision. If anything, the uncertainty that's surrounding this piece of land right now, because uncertainty creates fear, may affect price now. But I think that a good development here that's done with their deed restrictions as they have outlined already will create, at the worst, no price problems, and given that if the commercial highway passes, we may have more amenities in the community, which may create actually a price increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spindler. Anybody else?
Beverly Sharp, 422 Kings Ridge Drive. I don't want to be repetitious of what I said before, but the high-density multi-family zoning that's being proposed is really not compatible, backed up to moderate upscale residential property. That use allows large group recreational facilities, pools, tennis courts. Again, you have many people packed into a small area. You get noise, traffic, crowding of schools, as has been mentioned. It's just not appropriate, and people have counted on the zoning that is already there in making their purchases and their investment decisions, and there's no need to change it. It needs to stay like it is. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Again, Randy Caldwell, and I couldn't have said it any better than the younger gentleman, at least I think he was younger than me, that was two voices in advance of me. Again, I support this for the same reasons, knowing the effectiveness that the restrictive covenants can have on the property and what that will establish as far as the market of the property. Again, I have a daughter that's graduating college in the summer, and I know, part of the meltdown in this economy was the fact that they gave people loans that had no business getting loans, and I know she can't can afford a home. I hope I pray she can afford that $1,400 at the Paddock Club when she graduates, but I doubt that she can. But again, when you talk about our future residents, I would dare to guess if I ask everybody in here to raise their hand, whoever lived in an apartment at one point in their life, I would dare say that many people would do that, and and that goes for my kids too. I would love. The one thing I've always bragged about Murfreesboro is the opportunities that exist here to live, work, play, get an education, and still be able to afford housing in there. And I would love to see for the opportunity for my kids to have the opportunity to have some affordable housing, which is not purchased homes in my own community in North Murfreesboro. So for those reasons, I respectively do support this request. And with the effect, again, I appreciate my neighbors' concerns, particularly those that back up directly to this, and I would want to surely make sure that there's effective screening as part of those restrictive covenants to help mitigate the buffer on those areas. Thank you.
My name is Douglas Sharp. I reside at 422 Kings Ridge Drive. There's been a lot made about the covenants and restrictions, and they look great on paper, but there's no teeth in them. There's no enforcement mechanism. The planning directors told us directly the city does not enforce these. It's up to the banks. But their interest and my interest aren't going to coincide all the time. Their interest is in the developer. Speculative rezoning is simply a bad way to grow a city. Why don't you take the example you have in the Gateway? It's been a very successful thing to to create an overlay district that does have some enforcement teeth in it. Why don't you take time to create an overlay district in North Murfreesboro where a lot of development is going to take place over the next decade or two and be successful there too? Just don't do this speculative rezoning piece by piece. It will lead to a disaster. And therefore I oppose this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Anybody else?
Thomas Solkowski, 503 Kings Ridge Drive. I want to reiterate what Mr. Sharp said, that speculative rezoning just isn't appropriate in this setting. We don't know exactly what form of multi-apartment type complex would be in this area. I'm right off Kings Ridge Drive, right behind the Siegel schools, the elementary. I have 3 children in one in each of the schools, and they do walk to school. I'm concerned about significant traffic issues and safety issues for my children and other children in the neighborhood that walk to school. They alluded that there would be an entrance off Memorial into this planned development. I would think that there would have to be more than one entrance and exit from this property, and have great concerns that Kings Ridge Drive may have one of these side roads off to it, significantly increasing traffic throughout the day. The noise levels, again, could be significant, as well as the lighting. These are all disruptive to an already quiet residential community. Others that are in favor of this allude to the fact that we have to just accept growth in our community because it's something that's just going to happen. Growth will happen, but let's plan for it appropriately and make the proper decisions to enhance the North Murfreesboro area in the best possible way, just as the Avenue development took place. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Solkowski. Would anybody else care to speak?
I'm Tom Davis at 502 Bluebell. When it became apparent that we were going to be relocated to this area after Hurricane Katrina, my late wife and I looked all over the Middle Tennessee area. And we immediately gravitated to Murfreesboro for a lot of reasons. One was the dynamic current that we felt in the community. There was a lot of good development going on and a strong, active base with the university. But we were also struck by the very conscious effort by the community to retain those attributes that made it a small, close-knit community. It's wonderful to go shopping in the avenue. It's also great to throw a lawn chair under the tree on the square like I'm going to do on Friday night for Friday Night Live. And the two of them have got to go together. I love my neighborhood. I've got neighbors around me that have been there for 35 years since the houses were new. And I knew when I moved in that there was going to be development. I'm not anti-development. It's a fact of life. We've done a lot of wonderful development in Murfreesboro. But there's also parts of town that I drive into and I go, what? What were we thinking? How did this happen? And that's what I'm afraid of. I don't like speculative rezoning. We've got an opportunity right now because investor money is starting to come out after the bad years we've had to know that there's going to be a lot of development up and down Memorial Boulevard, up in this North Murfreesboro area. We've got a chance to step back for a minute and go, let's stop and think about this. Let's plan this. What's the master plan? What's the vision? What are we going to do in this area before we do what I call slash and burn development? I strongly believe in an overlay district. If Franklin can do it and if the county can do it, there's no reason we can do it. And we shouldn't be doing any speculative rezoning until we have a vision in mind of what we're going to do for that corridor. I don't want to wake up one morning and look out my window and go, I live on Cason Lane. And I don't want somebody 10 years from now to drive up North Memorial Boulevard and go, what in the world were they thinking? Let's stop and think about it. I oppose this. Let's not do it. Let's develop an overlay district and do the whole corridor correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Anybody else?
Hi. My name is Greta Gerald. My daughter Briley and I live at 3240 Memorial Boulevard. I support the rezoning, and I ask you to vote for it. When my late husband, before he passed away, one of his favorite things was to watch you on TV. I find him asleep in his chair watching the Planning Commission.
We understand the.
Don't worry, he would fall. Don't worry, he'd fall asleep during the Super Bowl too. He loved the city of Murfreesboro. I wish he were here to tell you how much he loved Murfreesboro. He loved North Murfreesboro. I've heard a lot of comments, and I understand them all. But I think that we need to lend a little trust to our neighbors. The Hayneses, I think, have worked very hard to work with the community. I applaud them for that. Brooks used to talk about how much he appreciated our city planners and the thoughts that they put in to new developments. Again, we encourage you to vote for it. And every morning when I wake up and have fixed my coffee and I look straight out my window, I'm looking at that property. I have full faith that it will become a beautiful part of Memorial and that it will be done correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gerald. Anybody else? Last call. Seeing nobody come forward, I'm going to close the public hearing. I want to thank everybody for their comments. Mr. Adelot, do you have any comments of your own, sir?
Yes, sir, I do. I've counted right at 31 speakers tonight. We had a pretty good turnout for these two public hearings.
I can't hear. Can you come to the podium?
I'm going to speak from here, Mr. Sharp.
Well, I can't hear you.
You can hear me. I'm speaking to the Planning Commission.
Mr. Sharp, if you want to come up to the front row, there's plenty of seats up here, sir.
The speakers have made a lot of good points, and amazingly, I heard very few questions. But I did hear a couple, and a couple of them brought into question some things that might need some clarification, possibly on my part or the planning staff's part, or put in perspective. First of all, Mr. Pearson, who resides on Wessex Court, and the statements about the street stubs, and he spoke during both public hearings. But in the first one, he spoke about my statements and also generally the city's position about extending streets into undeveloped property. And as I look at the map, and you might want to look at it too, there are two streets that stub into this property. One of them is Majesty Drive, and it stubs in from the west, and it simply dead ends into the tract. And it's a couple of elbows away from the nearest intersection. It's a little distance. The only way to turn around there is that those elbows are in someone's driveway. And those elbows are almost the size of a cul-de-sac, so it's pretty easy to turn a passenger car around. It's a little bit more difficult for a garbage truck, fire truck, something like that. The other street is Wessex, and on one of the illustrations, the street's not named, but on the smaller or the smaller scale illustrations, the ones that are zoomed in closer show where Wessex Drive, and it stubs in from the south. Now, I have a very strong position, and my position reflects the position of the city on this, and that is that when public streets are extended in development, say for instance this property is developed with public streets, whether it be Office General or RS-15, public streets need to be extended. They don't need to end in just dead ends into a property line. They need to be extended. There's also utilities in those streets, like water lines, electric lines, possibly sewer lines, that need to be extended also. They help to interconnect our community. It's important to see these type of connections. And you see them throughout the Regency Park. And I want you to understand part of the reason why. A well-connected street pattern helps to mitigate traffic impacts. It gives you alternative opportunities to drive. But even more importantly, emergency access. When the tornado ripped through Murfreesboro in the Haynes Drive area a couple of years ago, just to the south, we were cut in half. And a lot of people had a lot of trouble getting home that night. But they sure would not have gotten home if they had to go through that tornado zone. They would not have made it home that night. As it were, they had other routes to get around. They could go around. So if you can't go one way, you can go another way. These are very important. Our fire department, and I'm speaking on their behalf of this, very much endorses the need to see these types of streets extended when they're public streets. Now, let's talk about alternatives. Sometimes we see developments that don't have public streets. Let's talk for a moment about the possibility of an apartment complex. If an apartment complex were to site on that property, now the paradigm shifts. It's a different situation. Now you're looking at a different type of land use. We don't need to see that apartment complex with the same interconnections as we would as if it were a subdivision. What we would see there, though, is a need for emergency access only. We don't need to see the garbage truck going in there because the garbage truck is going to come in a different way with a different service. It's not going to be the side loaders that we provide to the subdivisions. It's going to be more than likely the truck that hauls the compactor, not the dumpsters, but a compactor. So what the fire department says in these instances is, give us a gated entrance. Gate that entrance is fine, but if an emergency happens, we want the ability to be able to open it up. It can be padlocked for all they care because they're not going to let that stop them. They're going to have bolt cutters, and they're going to cut that thing wide open, and they're going to get in there. And these type of accesses are important. And you've heard these discussions as we review site plans and other developments through the years. So I want to tell the people who live on Wessex, I want to tell the people who live on Majesty, and I want to tell people who live anywhere in our community that live at the end of a dead-end street that dead ends into another tract of land. If it's a public street happening beside you, we're going to promote seeing that street extended as a public street if that's the type of development that's taking place. If it's a complex, whether it be an apartment complex or a condominium, we're going to take a different look at it and possibly want to see a gated access. It's a different paradigm, and it deserves a different approach. So I've been very consistent on that, and I hope that those who are listening will listen to me because I don't want other people to be surprised in the future. Now I'm going to take one more step back. Sometimes, and most of the time, that decision is going to be made by this body, the Planning Commission. You're going to hear from the staff. And you can hear a very strong stance on the part of staff about sending these street connections as I've described to you. But sometimes, in your judgment, you say, well, maybe we just don't need it after all. We can live with it. That may be your prerogative as a planning commission when you consider a subdivision plan or a site plan. But be aware, it's going to be just like Garrison Cove with the back entrance at Creek Walk, just like Northwood subdivision with the back entrance to Alexander, just like Bradford Place. And I'm going to tell Mr. Pearson, and I will be glad to tell him, someone has given him misinformation. Never did the Planning Commission tell anybody that that was going to be a gated entrance from Bradford Place into the Hamptons. Somebody's made that up. I don't know who it was, but it sure wasn't the planning staff. And the public record will show we always wanted that as a public street extension. It was never intended to be gated. It was never expected. For the period of construction, we didn't want the construction equipment going in there. And there was some effort to blockade it during construction, but once the construction was over with and the houses started to be constructed on their own, it was opened up, and that was always the plan from day one. Now, next issue, let's talk about overlay districts for a moment. We've heard a lot about them. Overlay districts have a place in our community. We have overlay districts. Some overlay districts are not the same as others. The Airport Height District, Airport Height regulations, is an overlay district, and it actually overlays this area. It's intended to protect the airport from the type of development that'd be incompatible with it, like cell towers and tall buildings at the end of the runway, or other tall buildings that would penetrate into these zones. That's an overlay district. The floodplain regulations formerly were overlay districts. We changed that to create a different type of floodplain regulation at the request of FEMA. But they used to be overlay districts because the floodways and the floodplains overlaid over land that was already zoned in some other way. The historic zoning district is an overlay district. It's an overlay district that was set up by state law for a community to be able to create into areas that had certain criteria that merited protection as historic places. And we have a historic district. And it is full of buildings that have certain contributing factors to the historic character of that area. And it is well documented of what those characteristics are. We also created the Gateway Overlay District several years ago. And just to pause for a moment about why we did that and how it might relate to this area is a good idea. Why we did it was the city had purchased land in the area around what is now the hospital, the Middle Tennessee Medical Center Hospital. The city owned that land. We had purchased it right at 400 or 500 acres. And right at about that same time, we began to construct the Medical Center Parkway from basically Loki Avenue extended westward to the new interchange at I-24. And the city was heavily putting money into the construction of the new interchange. The city was investing a lot of money, and we were doing it for a couple of reasons. We were trying to create a paradigm shift. I've already used that word once, and I'm going to use it again because I'm going to lead up to a reason why. But the paradigm shift we were striving for was to create an opportunity for more white-collar jobs in our community, to change how we view our community. We wanted to shake the reputation that we had in this region as being a blue-collar community, to be able to create an idea that we were something beyond that. We were trying to create a place of pride in our community that we could look to as an example of that is how it should be done. Because we knew no matter how much we regulated, we had to be a good example somewhere along the way. We had to create an example. Our mayor and council, our city manager, our city staff realized the need to create that example. And that's what we did with the land that the city owned. We did hire a company to help us, and they helped us to create a master plan for that property. And part of what came out of it was the hospital was one of the first buyers that came forward and said, we want to be in that place. We also had some other office users coming along. But we knew if we did not protect the area between that site and the new interchange, we were fixing to create an opportunity for failure. And the failure would have been someone coming in and continuing the development that we were seeing on Thompson Lane that were basically good buildings in an industrial zone that really undershot what we were trying to accomplish as a paradigm shift. Roscoe Brown is a good business. They are a good business in our community, and they contribute a lot, but they didn't have the appearance that we were trying to promote. So we stepped back, and this planning commission spent several months at the request of our city council studying overlay districts and creating design guidelines for that part of our community. We had public meetings with the residents in that area and the property owners and the entire community. We stepped back and drafted regulations, and then we had public hearings on those regulations and invited people to participate in their development. And over the course of about 6 months, and I'm not sure about the time, but I'm thinking about 6 months or beyond, we brought something forward to the city council, and ultimately it was adopted as the Gateway Overlay District. But it was for the reasons of creating a paradigm shift of how we viewed ourselves and what our community could be. And we engineered it. And I look back as thinking, what a wonderful career achievement. Not only did we create a nice place, but we created a difference in how we view our community. Now, how does that relate to this area? I don't see quite the same dynamic, but I'm not against the idea of overlay districts for other parts of the community. But I'm not the right guy to come to and lay it down and say, this is it, it's drafted, here it is, adopt it, it's ready for you to do. That is the wrong way to do it. This type of thing has to come from the top. If the community leadership, me and our city council, doesn't want it to happen, ultimately they're going to vote on it, and they're going to, well, it just won't work. It's got to come from the top. So it's good to have these discussions at these type of meetings. It's good to discuss it with the council members. It's good to discuss it with the Plan Commission. But you've got to get them buying into the idea. And also, you've got to have a really good idea of what to accomplish. Let me tell you something. You hear the people in this community, and you hear them tonight. We like Memorial Boulevard. You've done a good job. But oh no, you're about to ruin it. Where did the trust go? You all have done an excellent job to this date, but all of a sudden you're faced with making a decision, and they're afraid that you're going to make the wrong decision. Ladies and gentlemen, you all have done a good job. And members of the public, I know that you all have participated a lot in these decisions, and you're concerned about change. But I have confidence that standards in place already can go a long ways to addressing these types of situations. So that's the issue on the design guidelines. The design guidelines that we have are not the design guidelines that created Broad Street or South Church Street in the area north of the interstate. We have standards that have changed that. This area of South Church Street out there around Indian Hills is the new standard. That's the type of development you're going to see more of. And you're going to see more of the avenues because we created that good example that says that's what we want. And when I turn it over, when a developer comes to our community to talk about development, the staff has a pre-development conference with them, and we point out what we want to see happen in this community. And we try to get buy-in. And from there, we've created the idea of that they want to do it right to begin with. It's to their benefit. We talk with them. We show them what we want. They know it's so much easier. We don't keep them guessing. We show them good examples because we have good examples to point to. Now, I want to talk a moment about the monumental changes that have happened in our community. I came here in 1980, literally, January 2nd of 1980. At that time, we were a community of 30,000 people inside Murfreesboro, in a county of right at 60,000 people, with Murfreesboro being 30,000 of it. Today, Rutherford County is upwards of 250,000, almost a 250,000 people. And Murfreesboro is a community of 108,575 as a certified population. And we're more than that because we didn't quit growing on April 1 of 2010. That's a monumental change. We are a big community. When we adopted the zoning for this area in 1988, we did not have the avenues. We did not have the gateway. We did not have an area that was identified as being a Class A office area. MTSU was much smaller. I'd say it's probably down around, I would say about 15,000 student population. I'm just guessing right now because it seems like it's about 15,000 at about that time frame. And now we're looking at about a student body of 25,000. The jobs, we have a tremendous number, and right off I couldn't tell you just how many. With just a little bit of research, I could tell someone how many apartments we've constructed in that time period. I've got a chart that's sitting on my desk right now that can tell me how many dwelling units we've issued as multifamily since 2002. And if that lady had spoke with me about that question, I've been glad to have made that available to her. In fact, I think it may be on our webpage. So we have had a monumental change in our community. And it's not over with. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the existing zoning. Office General Residential, OGR, what does it mean? OGR means Office General Residential, also allowed. It's a mixed-use zone. The Office General zone allows a density of about 17 dwelling units per acre. It is possible to develop apartments in the OGR district. It's possible to develop single-family homes. It's possible to develop duplexes, triplexes, and quadruplexes. It's possible to develop a complex of buildings that consists of a combination of single-family, two-family, three-family dwellings on one lot of record. So you could have one lot, 30, whatever size, and have about 17 dwelling units per acre, and they could be in buildings composed of 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units, or 4 units. The crux is they won't be able to have 5 dwelling units in one building, or 6 dwelling units. So what the OGR district does, unintentionally, if you choose to develop it with residential, you are penalized if you want to, well, you just can't build the buildings that would have more than 5 units in any one building. That promotes a limitation on good design. That's what it does. I favor, if I'm going to look at an apartment complex, I want that apartment complex to be well designed. I want, and how it relates to the adjoining properties. I want it to be well managed in how it relates to other properties. It is my experience, and I believe everybody here will agree, that the key to property is good management. Poor management, you've got chaos. Good management, you can keep the bad in check. A well-managed complex is much better than a bunch of quadruplexes and duplexes and rental homes. I will give you an example. The Brighton subdivision on Pitts Lane. It is basic housing, but it's composed of a single family, 2-family, 3-family, and 4-family dwellings. And it seems that it has experienced more difficulties in management because the ownership is so fragmented. That promotes poor management. Paddock Club is under one ownership, and part of its key is it's well managed. Good management. And it's well managed, it's a good environment, they can demand the high rents. So good management is what's important. Now, I will be very frank with you. RM16 does not mean it's going to be good management. RM16 does not mean it will be good management. I will repeat that. OGR does not mean it will be bad management. But what I see is, with the RM16, the potential for better design, which will lead to better management. The dumpsters. I want to talk about that for a moment. A couple of years ago, as part of our design standards citywide, one of our upgrades was to require that multifamily developments with more than 75 dwelling units are required to have centralized compactors. They can't have the individual dumpsters spread around the complex because they bang around, they make noise, they are often contributors to poor stormwater quality because of the way they drain, and they promote bad management. Compactors are a much better technology when you have the size. They're quieter, they're centralized, and they require management to be more involved because someone has to run that thing all the time. So we require for any complex of more than 75 units that it has a compactor. That's going to be a requirement for anybody. You all may have heard more questions. Oh, yeah, one more thing I want to come back to. One last thing I want to talk about, unless you all have questions. I want to talk a little bit about these restrictive covenants. A little over a year ago, when the applicants made their previous application, they came before the neighborhood at the Siegel Elementary School. And very quickly, it became clear that there's a lot of misinformation about who the Hayneses were, what they had done, what their intentions were, who all they included. They seemed to be a mythical group of people with bad intentions. It just seemed to be just a recurring theme. Soon after that neighborhood meeting, but before the public hearing, they decided it was really best to withdraw. They conferred with me, and I said, guys, you're going to have a really very difficult time getting it approved, because it's going to be, that neighborhood meeting is going to be much worse played out at the City Planning Commission and then the City Council. And they agreed. They said, we don't want to move forward in this situation now. So they withdrew their application. And I continue to think about the property. I have a saying, land never goes away. It doesn't. Land never goes away. It's always going to be there. And issues surrounding it will continue until that property is developed and it is squared away. So I undertook to contact some of the people who had, particularly one, Ms. Yoko, who had been involved with the, facilitating the owners to attend the neighborhood meeting. I viewed her as someone who was, had some very good thoughts about her neighborhood, who was passionate about her neighborhood, who cared about what was happening, and someone who I felt that I could speak with. So we chatted a couple times on the phone. And I brought to her the idea that, well, maybe if you really would, I'd like to, for your organization to meet the Haynes a little bit better. But I don't think that they're going to be comfortable meeting with the whole group like we did out there at Siegel Elementary. And she concurred, and I said, if you'll give me 5 people, I will have them sit down with you, and we're going to talk about their property and the neighborhood. So to her credit, and I really do appreciate it, she set about and she helped to get what I referred to as a focus group. And we met out there at Siegel Elementary and with the Hayneses, Mr. Larry and Terry Haynes, and we discussed the development possibilities, their intentions, who they were, what they had done, their involvement with Regency Park subdivision, their involvement in the community as a businessman, and the discussion turned to the former application that was considered, but actually never got to the Planning Commission, and that was for a development by the same developers who developed Paddock Club. They were looking at a development called Stone Gate. They had looked at the Haynes property, and because they had encountered some geotechnical issues on the property after they had started the process, they chose another site in their community on Franklin Road, beside the Franklin Road Baptist Church, and had departed from the site. But they had gone to the point of having developed a site plan for that property. And we brought it out at the meeting, and we discussed it. And we discussed the possibility of, if you're concerned about design issues, restrictive covenants can go a long ways toward addressing that. And that's where the idea of restrictive covenants really came into play. So the Hayneses were encouraged at that point to develop some bullet points, which they sent back, which ultimately in April, they came back with what Mr. Murphy discussed tonight. I have endeavored to facilitate that. It was never really a negotiation. It was never a negotiation in the sense it was a discussion, and I think that the Hayneses were very agreeable to trying to cap off the Regency Park subdivision with an appropriate end. We discussed how Riverbend concluded with townhomes out front, and we discussed how Regency Park should conclude. And maybe single-family houses all the way to Memorial is not the best way. Something else could probably be a very appropriate ending. The restrictive covenants were intended to be something that the developers would manifest as good intentions. I've never endeavored to mislead anybody that the city would enforce them, because, quite frankly, we cannot. I've never endeavored to lead anybody to think that the city would try to, because, quite frankly, I think it would run afoul of fair housing to do so, for the city to do so. So I've kept that issue arm's length, but I have facilitated the discussions between the Murphys, and to some degree have acted as a go-between. So that's how the restrictions come up, and that's what role I have played, and that's what role the city has played. We cannot enforce them. We do not need to enforce them. But even so, they have a very real possibility of being a very potent force to shape development on that property. I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Any questions from the Planning Commission for Mr. Adelot? Jones.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to go ahead and address on the restrictions, because I was thinking about that a lot while they were discussing those. And I still think there's a little bit of maybe misunderstanding there on the restrictions from the homeowners. That we have restrictions on almost every subdivision in the city, including Regency Park. And those restrictions are not enforced by the city at all, either. They are enforced by all of you all as the homeowners. And so when you talk about your restrictions on Regency Park, that said your houses are going to be a certain size, they're going to be brick, whatever all your restrictions are, I don't know. Those are enforced by you all as homeowners, and if you have a problem, you have to hire an attorney if you want to sue your neighbor over something they're doing, that is all between you all. So that is true with all the restrictions on all the properties in the city of Murfreesboro. They are not governed by the city of Murfreesboro. They are all governed by the homeowners or the landowners or whoever. So I don't, I just want to make sure that you don't misunderstand that this is anything different. It's not like we're telling you that there can be restrictions on the property, but nobody can enforce them. That is no different than all the restrictions on any piece of property in Murfreesboro that happens to have restrictions on it. So restrictions such as are being proposed, I would think, are kind of unusual on a commercial or on an RM12, RM16, any apartment complex type property or any commercial type property. We don't normally see or hear about restrictions when we're sitting up here talking about rezonings. We probably do. They'll correct me on that. But, in general, that's not a huge part of it. So I think the restrictions that they're discussing putting on the property is really, it's a big deal in this case for what they're trying to do and how they're trying to let you know that what they're wanting to do is a nice development on the property. The other thing that I kind of wanted to address was the continued reference to speculative rezoning and the fact that, we're not requiring a planned development. Let's see. Some of us have been on the Planning Commission for quite a number of years. I'm about, next month, be 13 years for me. When we started out, when I first was on the Planning Commission, I don't remember ever having a planned development rezoning request come before us. Every piece of property that came before us, was just, they're asking for rezoning. We think about it, we talk about it, we listen to the public, and then we discuss and make a decision on what we think the right zoning for that property is. So, but to me that sounds like what everyone is referring to as speculative zoning. And I don't think that's speculative zoning. It's just not a planned development. Planned development seemed to come along later in the years when we had so much development going on that we needed something to help us regulate some of the things. So I think it was just kind of a shift, and I think that shift has gone the other way now. And also, just to say that the master zoning plan for the whole city that was in 1980 or 88 or 84, whenever that was, we meet once a month and have these public hearings. And we are meeting for the public hearings for the purpose of listening to rezoning requests. So if we were just going to rezone the whole city in 1980, whatever it was, and never change a thing, we wouldn't ever be doing any of these meetings. And I won't say that everything we've done over all of the years was perfect, but I do think that we feel like that I will certainly say that I'm extremely proud of the way Murfreesboro has developed. I've been here since 1964, and I don't remember how many people were here when I moved here. I don't remember much about it, but it has certainly grown a lot. And I think one of the things that, especially over the last few years, I want to have a community that I feel like my children that are 20 and 23, soon to be hopefully employed and in the workforce and looking for a great place to come and live and work and raise a family, hopefully one day. You know, I would hope that they feel Murfreesboro is someplace they could come back to. And I know the towns that my parents grew up in, all my cousins, you know, none of them went back to those areas. You know, my parents didn't go back to the towns they grew up in because they look the same way they did the first time I ever saw them. When I go back today, there is absolutely no change in their cities, towns. And so I'm happy that we don't have that same situation in Murfreesboro. So I think, you know, the growth is good as long as we plan it, and I think that's what we try to do on a regular basis. And like I say, we're not always perfect. We don't always do the right thing, but I think we do the right thing the majority of the time.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Who else has questions or comments? Mr. Clark?
Mr. Adelot, would you kindly explain the process about after zoning takes place and plans that come before this body in a preliminary format and then to a final format?
Okay, there's two circumstances. The first would be site plan review. If we have let's say, for instance, an apartment complex or a bank or a restaurant, we would consider a site plan. That authority comes to you through the zone ordinance. The site plan is submitted, and if it conforms to the requirements, then it is approved. Now, the requirements require the landscaping, the setbacks of the structures, the maximum height of the structures, the orientation of the structures, the required parking, all the things that are in our zone ordinance and the standards that we require for development. If they are met, then it merits approval. If, on the other hand, it does not, well, it probably never would get to you because the staff would have pointed out the problems and they would never have pursued it, but it would merit denial. Now, that is if it's on an existing tract of land that is ready for development. On the other hand, the other form is subdivision process. Subdivision regulations are for public infrastructure, public streets. In that case, they turn in a preliminary plat along with a master plan if it's a large tract that's going to have multiple sections, something like a large subdivision. And the preliminary plat is basically the site plan for the development. It will show where the public infrastructure will be constructed, the sewer lines, the water lines, the storm drains, the curbs and gutters, the type of asphalt, and it will show how they will conform with our subdivision regulations. Subsequent to that will be a final plat. It's basically a cadastral survey. It basically shows property lines, easement lines, special notes on the property, floodplain requirements, the sort of things that are necessary to have it recorded, the certifications from the various city officials, and if it meets requirements, it too merits approval. Again, if it does not, it merits denial. It is your authority to approve them. This is a recorded instrument, and once it's recorded, it becomes basically the deed reference for a property. Now, in the Gateway District, where we have a overlay district, it's a little bit more long. It's a longer process because in the Gateway we have an initial review that focuses on the architecture, and then a final review that focuses in on the final architecture to confirm that they met the requirements that were talked about at the first meeting, and then the final site plan.
Anybody else?
Mr. Lamb, Mr. Adelot, I've had some long-term friends in the Brent Mead area want to know when we're going to put a traffic signal in there. And we've always told them that the traffic does not warrant it today. With continued development down Memorial and the cut through of Kings Ridge, is there some hope for getting a traffic light in there?
Well, I think the traffic signal is a matter of being an eventuality. The city's transportation department monitors this intersection quite a bit. It monitors it very closely because it's one of the intersections that we receive a lot of requests about for traffic signal from motorists in the area, residents in the area. It is my expectation that the development, as we're looking at, probably won't cause it to be warranted, certainly not by itself, but if it does, when we look at a site plan, one of the things that you can do as part of a site plan, and we would expect to be done, would be to have a traffic evaluation done. What is going to be the traffic impact? And if the impact of that development is going to cause the need for the traffic signal, the developer of it is going to have the opportunity to participate in installing it. That's my nice way of saying it's going to be his responsibility.
So he'll pay for it?
If he's causing the need for it, yes, he will. One thing I want to point out about this zoning plan, I want to call your attention to something about it. I want you to look at the illustration that shows the two zones, both the red and the orange. Notice that the orange is deeper, has a greater depth off of Memorial than the commercial lots to the north or the commercial lots to the south. Notice that. And it may look a little bit odd to you, and you may wonder, well, why are they so much bigger? Well, the reason is we're going to expect that when the property is subdivided, that they create a backage road, probably as a private drive. And a good example of where this has been done is on South Church Street, across from Rutherford Boulevard, at the Crystals and the car wash. If you notice, there's a little backage road right there to West Rutherford Boulevard, where those lots, they have the ability to get out of the traffic signal. And that will be tremendously important for whoever is developing those commercial lots. It will give the ability to get out for a left turn out or a left turn in, and it will help to mitigate traffic. That also may help to increase the warrants for a traffic signal, because it's going to make that a little bit more important intersection. But Mr. Young, I did discuss this with our transportation director. He says we're going to continue to monitor it, and as soon as the state will allow one, we're going to have it installed. But if the developer causes the need before it's warranted by background and other growth in the community, the developer is going to get the opportunity to install it.
Mr. Alott, there were some comments regarding traffic on Thompson Lane, and we have a major thoroughfare study. What is the latest on expansion of Thompson Lane?
Recently, our transportation director brought to our city council, I think, a contract to start doing a preliminary study on expanding Thompson Lane to 5 lanes. And that would be from Thompson Lane around to Broad Street. This is something that's going to take quite a number of years. It's not something that's going to happen immediately. There's a lot of steps. These type of road improvements, it'll be a much longer time in planning and design than it will be in construction. So Mr. Richardson tells me we're some time out, but we're very seriously beginning that process. Now, one thing I want to tell you that complicates transportation on Thompson Lane, ironically, are those schools. We have a 2-lane major arterial, actually it's 3-lane in that area, that is a school zone. And when you put a school zone on a major thoroughfare, you are basically impacting its functionality as a transportation facility. It's a school access street as well as a major thoroughfare. We as staff, we do our best to communicate to the school boards, both the city and the county. Please be careful where you site schools, because when you put them directly fronting on major thoroughfares, you're going to impact all the traffic on them. When you put that speed zone down to 15 miles per hour twice a day, you're really impacting traffic. And that's part of the situation we find ourselves in on Thompson Lane. Now, one of the things that we're doing in a major thoroughfare plan that's hopefully will help that will be a future interchange on 840 and the Cherry Lane extension across from Memorial Boulevard that will help take traffic off of Thompson Lane and off of Broad Street. And that's still on a major thoroughfare plan.
Any other questions or comments? Let's say something about speculative, Mr. Adelot. The word speculative was used quite a bit of a lot tonight. You know, real estate development is by nature speculative, whether that's commercial or residential or multifamily. There's always an amount of speculation involved with that. When Regency Park was first developed, it was definitely a risky, speculative deal there. When it started out on the south end near Haynes Drive, it started out in the very early 1980s when interest rates peaked, and the lots sit there and did not sell. And the restrictions on the early part, in best of my memory, is something like 1,600 square feet or in that range of minimum restrictions. And as those finally sold and more sections were developed to the north, and as it grew to the north, those square footage amounts gradually increased. And so when you finally got all the way up to the last sections up there where Kings Ridge is and Majesty and all of those, you know, nothing was hardly built less than 24, 25, 2,600 square feet and more. I believe the Haynes family was involved in quite a bit of that development, and I think everybody thinks Regency Park is an excellent subdivision, and it has served Murfreesboro well now for over 30 years. So this type of zoning is not uncommon for municipalities to adopt, because we have to plan for uses on what can go into properties. This is what the property owner is requesting. He has the right to request that. And that's why we hold the public hearing at this level, even though we're not mandated by the state to hold the public hearing at the Planning Commission level. The City of Murfreesboro deems that it is appropriate that we hold it at this level as well as the City Council level. So our process is fine-tuned, and it works very well. Obviously it does because of the participation we have here tonight. All that being said, do we have any other comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission? If we don't, we need to take action one way or the other on each of these proposals. First of all, the first proposal, 3A on your agenda, the zoning application to commercial highway on the front. Then after we discuss that any further, take a motion, vote on it, we'll need to move to the second application, 3B, which is the parcel going to RM16.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to make one more comment before we get on into that. And I meant to say earlier, I think all of us, at least I received a lot of phone calls and emails from everyone that had an interest in this proposal. And I wanted to apologize to any of you that I did not get called back. I tried to get all the way down the list. I did try to read all the emails. And I'm sure some of the others were, they're probably all better time management than me and got everybody called back. But anyway, I just wanted to apologize and appreciate the fact that those of you went ahead and left a full detailed message with all your comments, concerns, and everything, because we do listen to all those and we appreciate it. Appreciate you being involved.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. What are the wishes of this commission?
Mr. Chairman, if there's not any other comments, questions, concerns, on item 3A, the zoning on the 6.5 acres and 1.5 acres for the request to zone both of those commercial highway, I would recommend approval to the City Council for that.
We have a motion to recommend approval to the City Council. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor to indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries unanimously. The next application is for the multifamily portion of this project. We need a motion one way or the other on that.
Chairman Land, if there are no other questions or comments, I move we recommend approval.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Nay. The motion carries. both public hearings. I want to thank everybody that came and participated in these public hearings tonight. It will be moved on to the City Council, where this process will be repeated once again. This time, I know quite a few of you probably need to get home, so I'm going to declare a 5-minute recess. We have one more public hearing to do on another matter, so we will reconvene in about, according to my watch, about 9:36. Okay, we'll reconvene the meeting at this time and move on to the third and final public hearing of the evening. That would be the zoning change request to rezone approximately 49.2 acres from RS10 to RM12 for property located along South Rutherford Boulevard. University Villas, GP is the applicant. Ms. Ely.
Thank you again, Chairman Lamb and Planning Commission members. This third and final public hearing this evening is to consider rezoning some property located east of South Rutherford Boulevard, just across from the Chandler Place subdivision across Rutherford Boulevard. The property that is being requested to be rezoned is currently vacant, undeveloped land, and it's currently zoned RS10, which is single-family residential district. It's shaded orange in the map that's on the screen or in your agenda packets. Shows the property, which is approximately 49.2 acres. The properties to the north are the subject, the north along Rutherford Boulevard were the subject of a public hearing last month, and the request was to rezone this OGR portion, this RM16 portion, and this RS10 portion to CH, Highway Commercial District, and that was recommended approved and is going before the City Council next Thursday. This request, however, excludes that little area, and it includes only the area that's shaded orange. The properties that are to the north, the large parcels, and to the east are in the undeveloped area of Rutherford County and currently are served as agricultural land. Properties to the south are part of developed city single-family subdivisions that are zoned RS10, single-family residential district, and are the Stonegate and the Crestview city single-family subdivisions. The property owner has requested that the Planning Commission rezone the properties from RS10, single-family residential district, to RM12, and RM12 stands for multifamily residential district. The RM12 district allows single-family detached houses, single-family attached houses, 2-family, 3-family, 4-family dwellings, and multifamily dwellings by right. If it is developed with multifamily dwellings, there's a density permitted of 12 units per acre, not including any density bonuses that may be granted for recreational facilities such as pools or tennis courts. So just assuming that the 49.2 acres were developed multifamily complex under that RM12 district, under the requirements in the RM12 district, there could be a total of 590 dwelling units located on the 49.2 acres. However, the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department has issued a letter and blanketly saying there's no way that they can serve that many units. The maximum number of units that they can serve are 250 units. So the applicant has, the property owner has come up with a plan where it is still rental or multifamily housing, but it will only be a maximum of 250 dwelling units on this 49.2 acres. So that comes out to a density of about 5 units per acre, which is similar to that of our RS8 zone. And our RS8 zone is single-family residential district and it has a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet. The RS8 zone allows approximately 5.4 acres dwelling units per acre, and this proposed Rezoning would allow about 5 dwelling units per acre, so you can see that the density is much less than what would be permitted, and that's because the Water and Sewer Department said absolutely not. Just in our zoning ordinance, as a matter of reference, a 12-foot wide Type C buffer is required, landscaping buffer is required between existing single-family zones, so that would be those to the south, and any proposed RM zone. If this property does get rezoned and it gets approved by you and the City Council, then the applicant will have to submit a site plan, possibly a subdivision plat, for these properties, specifically giving the plans for the future on how they want this to lay out. They've shown us some conceptual plans, and I think you have one at your desk where you can see the concept, what they're wanting to do, but this is merely just for reference. It's not the site plan. This isn't the proper place to do a site plan review. The proper time and place for that would be if this rezoning is approved and when they submit those engineered documents. But you do have that for your reference. Of course, this property is flat, and staff's very aware of it, and our Mr. Sam Huddleston's very aware of it. And also, I guess the engineer with the same last name, no relation, Mr. Huddleston's aware of the drainage problems, and he's been working on some plans. Staff told him that from the beginning that we have some concerns about that. We want to make sure that it drains properly and does not negatively affect any of the existing residents. And they're confident they can come up with a plan with that. The applicants did hold a neighborhood meeting on Tuesday, May 24th at the Black Fox Elementary School. I was there, and so were my counterparts, as well as members of the neighbors and then members of the applicant staff. They were there to answer any questions. The Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning the properties from RS10, Single Family Residential District, to RM12, Multifamily Residential District. There are representatives of the applicants here, and they would like to give you a brief presentation regarding their plan. After their presentation, if you have questions, staff will be glad to answer them. Otherwise, you should conduct the public hearing before making your recommendation. I know there are a couple of boards that they're going to look at as well, but I'm not sure who's going to present first. And it's going to be Mr. Brick Murphy.
Thank you, Ms. Ely. I'm Brick Murphy. I'm getting a little tired here. I'm Brick Murphy of the law firm of Murphy & Murphy. I represent the applicants. We would like to discuss this project with you. As Ms. Ely mentioned, it's 49.2 acres on South Rutherford Boulevard, which is currently zoned RS10. We're asking it to be rezoned to RM12. My client's intention is to build a cottage-style development, which is a new concept for Murfreesboro. These cottages will be leased with a focus on the MTSU market due to the proximity to the school. The existing RS10 zoning would allow 150 beds approximately, 450 beds of approximately 150 houses. Due to the sewer capacity in the area, we've been told that the sewer department will not allow us to have any more than 250 units or cottages and no more than 750 beds. So even if we wanted to, the sewer department isn't going to allow us to have any more density than that. As an additional commitment, we've discussed with the neighbors putting down a private covenant as a restriction, additionally restricting the property to 250 units, no more than 750 beds. So that would be a belt and suspenders approach. We have both the sewer capacity issue that we wouldn't be able to have additional density, and we'd agree to put this covenant down that would, if sewer capacity freed up, we would commit not to putting additional units in. We feel that the cottage style development would be a good transition between the commercial property to the north and the single family to the south. My clients have also committed to putting additional restrictive covenants on the property to dictate certain of the design elements that are in the proposed development, the concept plan. I think well-managed cottage-style development with one management company would be a very nice development for the area and would serve as a good transition. One thing I thought I might point out is a good management company can monitor bad behavior in rental units much easier than a homeowners association can manage bad behavior. So, for example, a good management regime can put put covenants in their leases, put provisions in that say if you're loud and you get cited twice, you're out. And those are enforceable in Tennessee. So we feel like a well thought out project would be a good addition to the community there. Mr. Bill Huddleston with Huddleston Steel is going to walk y'all through the concept. Mr. Richard Ray and Mr. Larry Elliott, who are the applicants, who are partners on the project, are also here. I'll be here to answer any questions you may have, and my partner Matt Murphy is here as well. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Brick. Good evening, Chairman Lamb and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Bill Huddleston, president of Huddleston Steel Engineering here in Murfreesboro, and it's our pleasure to bring to you tonight a unique project for our town. This is a kind of project that we haven't seen here before. We're asking you for RM12 zoning, but if you had an RM6 designation, that's really all we need here, because as previously stated by Ms. Ely and Mr. Murphy, the sewer department isn't going to let us do more than 250 units. So that's what we're going to end up with, and as you see, it gives us a lot of green on our concept plan. We feel this is a good transition between the single-family areas to the south and the existing and potential commercial to the north of us. We had a good neighborhood meeting last week. There were really three issues that came forth in that meeting, and I'd like to touch on those real quickly. Number one, we're showing a connection to the south, on the southeast end of our property, a connection to an existing stub street into the single-family subdivision. Now, as discussed in your previous public hearings tonight, this provides some connectivity, which is very important in emergency situations. In this situation, it's going to be for only emergencies. We're going to put a crash gate. We call it a crash gate a lot of times, but it's really activated by the Yelp mode on emergency vehicles. So we anticipate that this connection may never be used, but if it is used, it would be used only in a emergency situation. I'd like to point out that under the current zoning, if we came in with a single-family development, this would be a public through street. So we think we're providing something with our proposed rezoning that would be more beneficial to our neighbors on the south. Another issue that was discussed was the buffer between the single-family to the south and our development. Obviously a good buffer is very important to provide between these two land uses. Not sure you can see exactly what I'm showing there on the bottom half of that top board, but you are familiar with it. That's the city's type C buffer that's required between multifamily developments and single-family developments. The requirement is for 12 feet of buffer. With our development, we propose to more than double this. We're going to leave 30 feet of buffer for the transition between the single-family and our multifamily development. Another thing that we're going to do, which was suggested by planning staff, and we thought it was a great idea, we're going to put our buildings between the single-family development and the parking lot for our multifamily buildings. In other words, we're not going to put a parking lot up against the single-family neighborhood so that they won't be subject to car lights or noise, at night when people are coming home. So we're putting our parking lot between the buildings so that these buildings will provide another buffer between the single-family development and our proposed project. The third item, which was discussed at our neighborhood meeting, and we have been discussing this at length with city staff, is drainage. We know that this is a very flat area of our town, and we know that the single-family areas to the south are also very flat. When you look at the drainage basin for our project, you see that the single-family development drains the other way. They drain more to the south and the west, and our project's going to have to drain to the north and the east. We are very fortunate that we have an agreement with the Lions property to the north and the east that we will be able to go on to them to facilitate drainage for our project, taking the drainage to the north and the east so that if there are any drainage problems along our boundary with the single-family development, we will be able to carry that stormwater away from the single-family development to the northeast. One thing that comes up often in these discussions is traffic. City staff asked us to do a traffic generation analysis. We did. We assumed what we consider worst-case scenario, that if the vacant property to the north developed as a super target, that our roadway along our northern boundary would still be able to accommodate level of service C traffic by being a 2- or 3-lane cross-section. We do not need a 4- or 5-lane cross-section for our roadway, even if a super target connects to it to the north. Our street is proposed to tie in to Rutherford Boulevard right across from Chandler Place. At this time, our development will not warrant a traffic signal, but we will put in the infrastructure so that someday when the other properties around us develop, once that signal gets warranted, it will be easy to install. We appreciate your consideration tonight, especially as the night wears on, but I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Mr. Huddleston, going back to your buffer statement of 30 feet, are the existing trees in that buffer area, and will they remain unharmed?
They are in that buffer area. There's been we took some lumber off this property, but in so doing, we made sure that we did not get within 30 feet of that property line. So all those trees that are viable will remain as much as practical, and we will also be planting bushes and other trees to supplement the existing trees that are there. But yes, we're trying to save every tree we can.
And I don't think you mentioned anything about any fencing, did you?
I did not mention anything about any fencing, but the developers have agreed that we will put a fence along the boundary between the single family and our multifamily project.
What kind of fence do you propose?
Not sure yet, but I imagine it'll be a 6-foot fence, probably some sort of privacy fence. We'll bring you those details when we come through for Planning Commission approval.
Okay. Any other questions from Mr. Huddleston?
If I understood correctly, this might actually improve some of the drainage in the neighborhood?
Yes, sir. We will be picking up the drainage along our southern boundary and taking it all the way north and east off of our property. So any storm water that's sitting around there right now will be carried away from that boundary.
Okay. Any other questions from Mr. Huddleston? Thank you, Mr. Huddleston.
Thank you.
Okay, we will conduct the public hearing. Same rules we had before. Please come to the microphone, state your name, give your address. Please hold your comments to no more than 3 minutes. We have several people here that probably are ready to get home by this time of night. So at this time, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
Hello. My name is Kay Davey, and I live at 1739 Ohio Court. After attending our neighborhood meeting a week ago, my husband and I went door to door in the neighborhood, making everyone aware of what was going to be the planned development on the property to the north. We decided to get together a petition of people who were kind of against that, and I presented that earlier in the beginning of the meeting. We stopped at every house that we felt was going to be directly affected by this, and to us that meant people who are going to be in visual sight of it. In total, we received 114 signatures. A lot of the people that we talked to were concerned about the property value, the security and crime, the noise, and our invasion of privacy. For our property value, we purchased our house 4 years ago, and we paid $122,500 for our house. Since we've lived in the home, we've had to deal with a lot of negatives. The market has dropped. There's already a ton of rentals in the neighborhood. There's a lot of foreclosures. And then also there's a lot of people who are getting ready to go into foreclosure and have sold their house way under market value. By adding these apartments right next to the property, we feel it's going to drop our property value, and we're going to have a hard time selling our houses in the future. I also kind of feel like I'm being pushed into renting my house because I don't know that the property value is going to be there to sell it. So that might be my only option. Security and crime was our next concern. The neighborhood is already very dangerous. We have drug houses around our corners. We have gangs walking our streets, and we have graffiti on our privacy fences. We're concerned that these apartments are going to make that worse, and we're a little worried about our kids playing in the yard right next to all that. We're also concerned about the noise and invasion of our privacy. They're going to be college apartments. No matter how you look at it, it's going to be several stories high. And we feel like just sitting on our front porch looking at college apartments is kind of an invasion on our view that we had before. I know we don't have any rights over that property, so that's fine. But and then also, what do I want to accomplish tonight? I was hoping to, I know our Ohio Court is the street that we're talking about being the emergency-only exit. I feel that Chalice Drive would be a better choice for the emergency entrance. He talked about the storms, and I understand that, but I also feel like medical emergencies and fires would be a more likely issue to come up, and Chalice Drive is much closer to the front of the main roads, so I feel like that would be a better choice. Also, another alternative would be Medford Campbell to carry that on through and go around the back of the property. I am happy about the fact that they did change some of the plans from our meeting last time. They took out the parking lot that was going to be right there at the end of Ohio Court. They also moved out two of the apartments so we would have more green space. And then also, the only other concern I have really is the distance of the buffer. It seems right now it's only 30 feet, I think is what he said. And that goes from our property line, that's not very far. It's going to be right in our backyards. So I'm a little concerned about that. I like the gate idea, but I was hoping that they might do more of a berm, so it would be a little bit higher up and kind of block the noise and block the eyesight. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else?
My name is Jessica Adcock. I'm at 1738 Ohio Court. We are right next to the property in question. We are here in opposition of the rezoning. My husband and I bought our house. Actually, we closed on it a year ago today. I realized that when we were sitting here. Never thought I would be here fighting for our privacy, and the reason that we bought the house was because it was on the end of a cul-de-sac. We saw our kids growing up there. We saw at least maybe the next 5-10 years of our life there, and now, already a year later, we're reconsidering this because I was an MTSU student. I lived in very similar apartments, gated community apartments, high-end, very nice, and there was still all of the things that she just mentioned, the crime, robberies. I mean, it all happened. And unfortunately, during that time of our lives, we weren't very concerned with the people around us. So I'm concerned with the repercussions of that and being so close. I feel like the best buffer would be a little bit more space. They have changed a lot of the plans, and we do appreciate that. The gate is I feel like would be very secure. I don't think it would be an in and out entrance for these people, but I still feel like I'm going to be sitting on my front porch and I'm going to be looking at back porches of college kids, and that's the number one reason why I oppose it, is because I was one of those college kids once, and I mean, let's be real here. So I do, really appreciate the fact that they have changed some plans, and I think that it could be nice, apartment or even cottage style, but still it is what it is. Considering a little bit more space between us and them would be nice. We are in homes. We want to have our families here, and we don't want to be concerned with parties, and crime and things like that. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adcock. Anybody else?
Good evening. I'm Eric Bloom. I live at 214 Tyne Avenue, and I have about a half a dozen houses that back up to this property or are adjacent to it. I guess my only question is, Rick mentioned that the owner was willing to add some additional restrictions in order to ensure that the design elements would continue, that would give us a little bit more guarantees, and what we're actually seeing would be actually what we would receive. But I heard him mention them, but I'd like for him, I guess, to elaborate on those. I think that might be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. We'll get him to answer that at the end of the public hearing. Would anybody else like to speak? Anybody? Seeing nobody come forward, I'm going to close the public hearing. Yeah, we can get the applicant back up. Either of the Mr. Murphys, Brick or your assistant, either one.
I'm Mr. Brick Murphy once again. My partner shoved me out of the seat there. We'd be willing to commit to additional restrictions. We had the 250 units, no more than that. We'd additionally commit to the fence as a restrictive covenant, to the 30-foot buffer as well. Also, we'd be willing to commit to, no matter what was developed on the property, 2 stories along the perimeter of the single family. And I think that's going to put them in a position, no matter who owns the property, to know that this style development is our intention. So it would be 2 stories on the perimeter of the single family subdivision next door, the 30-foot buffer, and the fence as well.
So you're committing to no more than a 2-story apartment on the perimeter of the development?
Adjoining the single family. With
so it wouldn't be your typical 3 or 4-story apartment?
Big monolithic building, no.
Mr. Murphy, would the restrictions include this cottage design or not necessarily?
Well, we want some flexibility as to that, but the goal is we'd have 250 units max. So no matter what was configured on the property, we'd be limited to that number, no matter what was put there. And then we've also got the height limitations, so that kind of pushes us into the plan. So the goal is to develop a cottage-style development.
Mr. Gilley?
Thank you, Chairman. Brick, one thing, and you and I have talked about this on this project before briefly. I think the cottage-style design that's been discussed is a really good concept plan. And I realize that your clients may want some flexibility in that regard, but I think what will go a long way is in placing those restrictions, limitations on building materials and facades and that sort of thing.
Sure.
In addition to those story height restrictions.
Okay. That shouldn't be a problem at all.
And I think those are things that could be drafted and developed between now and if this gets through this body before the public hearing at the city council level and then adopted by or recorded by third and final reading if that's the case. Is that
that's absolutely fine. And then that way we'd have them down before y'all before the city council considered it for the final time. Easily done.
Thanks.
My name is Richard Ray. I live at 2112 Woodlawn Drive in Nashville. And Chairman Lamb and members of the commission, thank you for letting us present our property to you tonight. I'm one of the owners of the property, and we have negotiations going on. We have a letter of intent, and a contract is being prepared from a company called Asset Plus. And they are a large company that owns, I think, about $2.5 billion worth of apartment projects across the country. And one of our architectural partner, Don Meeks, who was here this last week, he's done a lot of work for this firm, and they're a very quality firm. We know of them. They manage one property here in Murfreesboro. That's the point. And we've been out to look at it. It's well kept. It's clean. It's picked up. The grass is nice. The property is maintained. It's managed well. It's located in an area where the homes around there are from $300,000 to $500,000 around the property they presently manage, and it's about 90% college students. They do manage that property here. They are preparing a contract now, which will their purpose here is to build this cottage product. It's a product that's it's popular in college communities today. They exist in Knoxville and Tuscaloosa, at Georgia, and lots of large universities, LSU and others. So it's found that it's been very successful in college communities. It's really addresses the needs of the students. And so we have a buyer who is actively engaged in buying this property. If they, for some reason, decided not to, and we know their management and we feel that they're absolutely intent on doing this, we have other people who have talked to us that are interested in doing the same product here. So there's some other large companies that are waiting in the wings if this doesn't happen. So we feel very confident this is what will be built. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions for the developers from members of the Planning Commission? Okay. Mr. Adlott, do you have any comments, sir?
Yes, sir, I do. One of my comments is that this concept site plan is very nice, and it seems to indicate some intentions, but it's far from complete. My staff has not had an opportunity to give it a thorough going over. I've seen it. It continues to change as they continue to incorporate amendments to help to, work with the neighborhood, and I appreciate that they're doing that. And the site plan, for that purpose, is serving a good purpose. A couple of things, though. I'm not through wrestling with the developer on this. I think that there's some things that he and his team are going to need to change, particularly as they firm up their letter of intent with whoever is actually going to develop it and manage it. Access is going to be very important. I did want to come back to this thing about the gated access in the back. I did take time to meet with our, or at least to discuss this with our fire chief, our fire marshal, Mr. Honeycutt, and he tells me that his desire to see that back access on Ohio, and that's that cul-de-sac that sort of stubs out to the property line. I don't think it's labeled on the maps for some reason, but Ohio Court, to see that to be a gated access, and really just simply for the purpose of, in the event the other access is blocked, to have another way to get in there. And that is simply because it is the most remote possible access that stubs into this property. Chalice would be nice, but it doesn't fit the bill that he's looking for. He would like to see the most remote opportunity. And it is strictly about emergency access, not about responding to a fire. It's about responding in the event the other access is blocked. And it would need to be gated at all other times. I am going to tell you that I have made it very clear to the applicants that when they do come, that this interface with the single-family subdivision is the most sensitive part of the site. The drainage can be easily engineered. That's something that's just either it's going to be designed or it's not, and I think they can do that. From my evaluation, it's going to be expensive, off-site improvements, and it can help the drainage in the area because that area is so flat it just holds water. It's just like the top of this table. Spill a little bit of water, it's just going to stand around there and not spill off very easy. And that's what's happened in the back here. I believe that some of the backyards that backs up to this, they can be drained a little bit by draining into this area when they construct the drainage system, and that will be an improvement to them. But all the same, I think that as much green space as there is on this total site, that they could take a little bit more of that green space and put it in the back of those backyards. I can't help but think that there's no reason to crowd those backyards. 30-foot is nice, and you'd expect that. A 30-foot setback is basically ought to be what is required anyway. But they could do a little bit more than that. And I think if they look on the side, they can do it. They've got a lot of green area. They can put a little bit more where it will be most beneficial to the adjacent property owners who are going to be the most impacted by this. So I think that when they come back with a site plan, that's going to be something that the more final site plan, whoever does it in whatever form, that's something I'm going to keep on pounding on. So if you all will help to endorse the idea that that's something you all think is important, when you all look at it as a site plan, they will have the message from you as well, and will be anticipating it and make my job easier.
Okay. The crash gate, Mr. Adlott, that can work both ways, can't it? If we had an event where this neighborhood experienced an emergency where Medford Campbell was blocked off, where there was not access to the other parts of Brayville Pike or South Rutherford. Absolutely. Okay. In my experiences in the last 15 years with these huge storms we get in our community, it works both ways. And when you have another way home, when that big storm comes to your neighborhood, it makes the difference, literally, being able to get home or not. And it may be that the people in the high court are coming through this complex some night and they never expected to have to be able to get home.
and they will find that that's the only way they can get through when Medford Campbell has had a tornado come through. I hope it never happens, but when it does...
That's a remote possibility, but in the tornado 2 years ago, I could not get to my house in northwest Murfreesboro. I could not get there from the downtown area. It took hours to be able to finally get there. So.
And it took going around ways that you never...
Blocked every way.
Go. But when it happens, if it ever happens, it gives me some peace of mind to know that our community has given its residents another way home. Sometimes it's more than just fire trucks. Sometimes it's about getting home that night.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Aylock,
Wade.
you're saying on the buffer, what would you propose on the buffer instead of the 30 feet?
I believe that they could look for ways to maybe even look at what actually makes sense on the ground. I think they need to place and locate the existing structures. Notice on your plan, the little concept plan, it shows the property lines and they don't even extend to the back. Well, where are the existing houses? How are those houses oriented? What are in those backyards? It may be that in some areas that it could be wider. Notice what they've done something that's pretty neat. Looks like the engineer laid it out because look, they're all in straight rows. That's pretty fun, isn't it? But then the next guy's going to come and tell us that the curvy streets are more appealing. These guys are telling us the straight streets are more appealing. Someone needs to look at the aerial photographs, needs to survey what's out there and see what makes sense. And in some places where someone's backyard actually comes up close to the property line in the subdivision, maybe pull a little bit of curve into the street, pull those units further away. Where there's nobody crowding the backyard back there, they may be able to come in close. I think they need to take it to that level before they finalize what that buffer is going to be. It's easy to draw a 30-foot when they don't know what's over there, but it may not make sense when you actually find out what's on the other property line.
Are you saying we need to consider that prior to voting for?
No, I don't think it's a zoning issue. It is a site plan issue.
It's a site plan issue, okay.
Right.
I just want to make that clear.
This is nice for being able to discuss what they plan, but as I say, I'm not through wrestling with the team.
Yeah.
And besides, Ms. Logan's got to have a chance to take on the architecture.
Oh, I'm sure she's scared to death.
Well, she's raring to go. She's asked me the other day, when can she get it started? And I said, just hang on. You can have your chance.
Stick 'em. Okay. Any other comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Chairman Lamb, if there are no other questions, I'm comfortable with moving forward with the understanding that between now and the public hearing level at the council, we see put in writing and on paper the proposed restrictions that this team has mentioned tonight and that we've discussed, and addressing the issues that Mr. Adelot has brought up as well. And with that understanding, I recommend approval, but again, with the caveat that before the next public hearing, I want to be able to see in writing the next level of this.
I'd second that.
Motion is made in numerous seconds here. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I want to thank everybody for coming up for the public hearing on this tonight, too, by the way. We'll move on to the plats and plans portion of our agenda. We have two items under that. South Point Business Campus, Lot 16, site plan for 4,015 square feet on .66 acres, Zone LI, located at the intersection of West Rutherford Boulevard and South Point Way. Stephen Borah is the developer. Ms. Logan, good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb and members of the Planning Commission. This is probably one occasion where you're probably happy to see me. So I bring up the rear of the meeting. So the first site plan tonight is a site plan for a proposed office building of approximately 4,015 square feet, located at the southeastern intersection of Rutherford Boulevard and South Point Way. And our great cable department has shown that for us on the aerial photo. There's already a building on the other intersection currently, and this is a proposed building that will be similar to the Castlewood Square development. In terms of the architecture, it will be an all-brick building and similar in composition and with the pitched roof and the column front. So it'll be very similar to what's at Castlewood Square or Uptown Square. It's not the same developer, but a very similar design in terms of the building. And I've got pictures if you want me to show those to you of those existing developments. This is a site plan that has the potential for an additional 2,000 square feet in the future for medical office use. There's a proposed user right now that's an accounting firm that's relocating, from what I understand, and they're relocating from, I think, Maryland or Pennsylvania to the great city of Murfreesboro. Again, another example of our growth and our continual evolution as a community. And so this is just a very routine site plan that appears to be in good order. The majority of the staff comments have been addressed, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? This time of night, you're not going to have a plethora of questions, I don't think.
It's got the Logan blessing, then I think we've
If it's got the
high
Logan
level of comfort.
Exceedingly so. If there's no questions or comments, Ms. Jones.
What about this little, it says there's a trash enclosure back there on that, but is it on the sidewalk, I guess?
Actually, they're going to relocate that to the end of the sidewalk, and that's going to just be temporary, and then when they construct the rest of the building, they'll construct a more permanent enclosure at that point. It'll be fully screened. Even though it won't contain a dumpster, it'll contain just trash cans, they're going to build a screen, just like what we've asked them to do at Castlewood Square. Same screening, same type of landscaping to try to hide some of those back of house type issues.
Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Jones? Anybody else?
Ready for a motion.
If there's no more questions, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval subject to all the staff comments.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Next item is Stones River Manor Courtyard Apartments Phase 2, a site plan for 9 units on 2 acres, zone commercial highway, located along Castlewood Drive, Stones River Manor developer. Ms. Logan.
Yes, sir. Thank you. If we could go back to the screen, I'll show you the aerial of the existing Stones River Manor apartments. This side will actually be an addition of 9 units, 3 2-bedroom and 6 1-bedroom to the existing assisted living facility that currently sits between Castlewood Drive and Haynes Drive. This will actually be located where the rear of these buildings will now abut the rear that's there now. So if you were to go down Castlewood now, you kind of see the back of house there with the canopies and the cars. So the front of these buildings will actually face out towards Castlewood. So we'll have a more complete front. And it'll follow the same type of architecture that's already existing on site, all brick, stone type structures with a small hip roof. I think they're probably a 412, just guessing by eyeballing it. I don't know the exact pitch, but they don't have a large pitch to the roof, but a small pitch. And so it'll follow that same type of design. Staff did have a large concern with the original parking lot design feature for this in terms that it was going to be one-way access. The residents there really would prefer to have two-way, would really prefer to have an angled parking to assist with their driving needs. And staff was concerned about the one-way circulation and the possibility of some conflicts. So what we've done is we've worked with the engineer on the project, and I think we're going to go with a two-way drive access, 22 feet all the way through, which also addresses one of our fire department comments that requires a 20-foot wide access in this area, but allow them to have 45-degree parking angles through their parking lot, and there'll be opposing angles so that they still can have the angle parking as they requested, but also we get the 22-foot minimum drive access, which we feel comfortable for. It's definitely not an area where we want to have any chance that our first responders cannot access through the parking lot or get to the fronts of those units in case of an emergency. So I think we have that issue resolved with the engineer, and we'll continue to work with them on the final design of that prior to building permit. Otherwise, the site plan is in good order, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have. I also have pictures of the existing Stones River Manor if you would like to see them, if you have questions about the architecture.
Any questions?
No questions, Chairman. I move for approval subject to staff comment.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Ms. Logan, you have anything else?
Yes, sir, I do. Let's get out of this real quick. I have one other item under other business, and it concerns one of our gateway projects. In fact, we heard a lot tonight about our gateway, and obviously it's a testament to what we've been trying to do over there, is how successful, when you hear some of the testimony that was provided earlier this evening. But Gateway Village is the current development of Joe Swanson Jr., the mixed-use development, if you're familiar with the large building in the rear and the two buildings on the side. There's a site distance visibility issue that has arisen with the planting of the streetscape trees, which are the requirement of the 7 crepe myrtles in a row. I have pictures of that to show you. It's causing a visibility issue both from a site distance issue and a travel issue, as well as not being able to see signage. If we could go to, let's get this up. If we could go to the screen, I'll show you what I took from my vehicle. That's the picture I took from my vehicle today, which is an SUV, small SUV. And you can see how it does have right there in the way that that area of the Thompson Lane is, it does cause somewhat of a shortness with how much you're able to see. It will also preclude any visibility towards the signage at all, towards the entrance sign that was designed as part of the site. What he's asking to do is to be able to move the trees back behind the sidewalk area, and the ones I'm talking about are right there in this corner right here. These are the ones that you can see. They're not the tall limbed up ones. This is not part of this tree. This is the small crepe myrtles sitting right there. Those are the ones he's asked to move behind the sidewalk. If he did it on one side of the property, it would only make sense to do it on the other side of the property. We do have several other properties on the south side of the intersection of Robert Rose and Thompson Lane where they have been planted behind the sidewalk, but that was because the right-of-way in that area was too narrow to actually be able to install them between the sidewalk and the curb. At this point, this would be a change in the streetscape somewhat, but we also have looked at changing the streetscape just north of this at the intersection of Thompson and Gateway for the hospital campus. And the urban environmental staff doesn't seem to think that this will have an overall detriment or effect to the streetscape look in this area, due to the fact that the trees that have been installed in that area are being maintained in such a different fashion. They're all kind of looking different anyways, that this would not have a negative impact on that streetscape. So this is something that is a change to this site and would require your approval and modification for us to move forward.
Okay, before we move any further, let me make a comment. My real estate company represents the developer in this project, so it would be a conflict of interest inappropriate for me to join in the discussion or vote on this matter. I'll go ahead and conduct the hearing, the discussion. I will not participate in the discussion, and I will abstain from voting. So, Mr. Adler.
We're looking at an equivalency. It's going to be the same amount of landscape. It's just that it's going to be pulled back. You may be familiar with the crepe myrtles between the curb and the sidewalk. They're beginning to show up a little bit of we didn't expect this type of problem, and he's seen the experience now. And before they get, I guess, rooted in, we'd like to go ahead and get them moved so we can see the problem coming. He's identified as a problem. We'd like to fix it. We may be looking at some other adjustments like this in that area. But basically, instead of having it between the curb and the sidewalk, this narrow grass strip, put the crepe myrtles behind the sidewalk and in with the rest of the landscape. It's equivalency. We're not looking about less, any kind of less plantings.
As I stated earlier, he's moving them back. He's asking to move them back. He's not asking to eliminate them. He's just asking to move them back. And, of course, we would ask him to go in and seed in straw or sod that grass strip area so that it was a finished landscape look. It will not just be, dirt. He'll have to actually go through and provide a finished look to that area.
I think this is only common sense and logical. I move we approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? One abstention, me. Okay.
Thank you. That was my item of other business. I appreciate it.
Any other staff reports or other business? I hate to ask that, Mr. Adler.
No, sir.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay. Well, I'll still give you 3 minutes. So. Okay. If there's no further business, we stand adjourned.
All right.